Pam is on Zoom.
Hello.
And Neil, I sent you a message. Neil's not here.
Was that first? It makes sense. Yes. Attitude of education, no, seriously. You see, like, Harry Potter.
Yeah.
The last movie.
Yeah, I wish we could just sit here.
Yeah. I can rush your shirt. It goes out after the last meeting. Jokes. Yeah. Big fan of it.
It's only, trip over a, asset.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That is big. Same skill.
Yeah. I would rather.
Okay, now I'd like to hold everybody up on a beautiful evening. We'll get started.
That's what it is.
What's that?
Chitty Bang Bang, one of my favorite movies.
That's it. We'll get started. So welcome from the room and anybody online. We are opening the meeting for the Conservation Commission for June 11th at the Municipal Center and on Zoom. We have one member, Pam Francis, online on Zoom, and you may have the other member, Neil, join us as co-chair, or maybe not. But we have a quorum here, and so we can continue to do, we'll do a roll call vote since we have at least one member online. Welcome, everyone. We'll open the hearing with the first item on the agenda, which is the MBTA commuter rail right-of-way. This is an RDA for a continued meeting for an RDA. Description is implementing the renewal of the 5-year vegetative management plan, the MP, along the MBTA commuter rail right-of-way, ROW. Can I throw a few more acronyms in there for you? In Bellingham to eliminate, control, and manage vegetation along the right-of-way. Rita Pascoal is the Director of Environmental Killis Services, the applicant, and the representative is Matt Donovan. And the update from Hannah.
Continuation. We're working on some more maps.
So was Dan actually able to get together over?
So not quite, but we're gonna do that.
Making progress towards that. Okay, well, they're not in a rush. We're not in a rush. It's a good thing we're getting some determinations of delineation, which we have the approval to do and authorization to do, as you saw in an email from Hannah.
You have a continuation date?
To the
Yes, so we have a request to continue this to the 25th by the applicant. Any other discussion? Take a motion to continue the.
So moved.
Okay, second, thank you, Don, and thank you, Steve. So no other discussion on that? No. For a vote, James? Aye. Steve?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Ariane?
Aye.
Pam?
Aye.
And Mike, aye. Okay, that's all. Thank you. So we will continue that to the evening of June 26th. Is it
25th, yep.
You were the one. You confused. Okay, sorry. June 25th. Okay, please make that. Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda is a new meeting RDA, request for determination of fulfillability for 11 Lilac Avenue. Anybody here is here for that? Come on up to the table here, please, so you can be seen a little better and heard. Thank you. This is for a RDA for maintaining a tree anchored zip line, swing, and monkey bars within the 100-foot buffer zone to BVW, Boarding Vegetated Wetlands. I'm not going to mangle your name, so I'll ask you to identify yourself, please.
My name is Karunadharan Balraj, in short, Karun.
Okay, well,
I live in
Or
11.
you can sit if you'd like.
Oh, that's.
yeah, please.
That's fine. That's
Okay,
fine.
you are the applicant for 11 Lilac Lane.
Yes, that's right.
Lilac Ave, sorry. So why don't you briefly describe, after you've talked to Hannah and understand the process, what we're looking at here in the pictures and the numbers?
Yes, the application is to requesting approval for, I have a zip line and then the monkey bars and then a swing, for my kids and then every kids to play. And this is very, very close to my lawn, which is on the borderline of the buffer zone. And there is one monkey bar, which is almost 14 feet of feet distance from the stick that we have That's the closest, but otherwise, rest all are very close to my, the lot. So, and I have no plans to destroy anything there. You can see the pictures, we have plants, trees and everything there. There is nothing.
Is that area mowed at all?
No,
Okay, so that grass and we're seeing beyond the dirt area is no natural height of
Yes.
whatever is growing there. Okay,
Yes.
so it hasn't been cut.
Yeah.
All right. The only thing I saw the swing hanging there to the left of the tree.
so
and
there is a thin line, it's a zip line.
I saw the zip line in another picture clearly shown, but I didn't see the monkey bars per se. I
Oh.
saw them on the sketch, but I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
sure. Oh, those,
Yeah,
are
that's,
those monkey bars? It looks like,
Yeah.
looks like a ladder you climb up.
it's a ladder and then, doing the monkey bars for it.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I consider that just a ladder hanging on there. Okay. Yeah. I consider one bar setup, the jungle gym is like a big maze of bars that you climb over and
Right.
shapes, whatever. But,
I
okay, gotcha.
was gonna ask the same question.
Because of the three structures, a swing certainly and a zip line are not, I would not consider permanent in any way. And if the monkey bars aren't a massive structure mounted in concrete in the ground, as some playgrounds might have, pipes and so forth, then I would think that all three are considered temporary, movable, portable.
Yeah.
And you're basically having activities happen in that area, but you're not proposing doing anything, which
Yes.
makes our determination a little different as opposed to you obviously not wanting to do anything there and saying that. But what you're proposing to continue, get permission to continue to use in that area is stuff that you could remove very easily or could need to be moved from time to time because of where there's a spot out in the trees or whatever, but it's not permanent structures. Of the sort.
Absolutely. And it's only used during the summer period, so rest of
Around the
time.
winter time swing. Okay.
You know,
Questions from the commission members? Any questions, Steve?
So your vegetation I see in this picture behind us is going to remain as is. You're not bringing in a bed of wood chips
no,
or anything.
no, it's all.
I expect through use, some of it would get trampled and worn, correct?
So only where, I mean, if the kids are walking, running on that place where we have the monkey bars,
Yeah.
that's the only place.
Okay. So the vegetation as I see it shall remain.
Okay. No questions? And proposing to do some work in the area would be one thing, but since it's just continuing to use something, I don't think we prevent people from using parts of their property that are in the buffer zone. As opposed, like, for example, going for a walk, they have a large enough lot to do that and so forth. So I consider this type of activity where it's not permanent and is basically just permanent structures. Consider,
Yeah, and I think what had kind of prompted the notice of violation is there had been like a little bit of like clearing out of the leaves and stuff that were there, so it looked like things had been cleared, but now that vegetation is coming in, it looks a lot better than it had before. So I think the concern was primarily just, is it gonna continue, like, is it gonna keep being cleared? Is there gonna be things
Okay.
like that? But
So
he-
when you remove
Burn
the
that
leaves, that was in the spring? The leaves you're talking about being removed. in the
Yeah,
area.
so during the fall, the leaves falling down and where the kids were walking, so I was afraid of there could be some bugs or snakes or anything, so I just cleared those leaves.
So maintaining the pathways
Yeah.
or the whole area
Only,
being raked?
only that in those areas.
the whole front section was
Because I think part of the buffer zone area is to remain natural, which would be leaves falling down, not, trees in big tangle, that's, actually kids to climb around or something, but safety thing, but, I think that continuing to rake as opposed to mow would be considered a modification change to the area. It's supposed to remain natural, so going forward, we would want, I think, the area to not be raked of
Yeah.
leaves. Just let the leaves lay, they'll lay down flat, kids run on them, they'll flatten them out, and believe me, any snakes or any critters that are in the area will head away as soon as the kids come out running the first time. Probably stay well away.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, Hannah, can you bring the drawing up, please?
Raking qualifies for like a minor activity in the buffer zone.
Right, I think going forward, since that's already been done months ago in the spring, I'm not worried about the past ones, I'm going forward. And if we want to continuously raking it up.
This is not clear, but is this the 100-foot buffer? Up
Yeah.
here?
The blue line, where it hits the blue line,
Okay, not this.
No,
So the intrusion into the buffer is a matter of feet.
just
Very
go.
little. that was,
What's that?
that was the erosion control line that was established when the development was built.
Oh, okay. Those pillboxes and things.
Yes. No, open space is the two boundaries in the back.
All right, any other questions, comments? Okay, so, I don't really need a motion, I guess yeah.
Do we need a motion? Is it a motion?
Yeah, it's an RDA, so.
With a negative determination.
Yep.
Oh, wait, that's what someone wants to make a motion for.
I'll make a motion.
As stated.
I guess so it would be a negative RDA, which means you'd be allowed to continue to use it the way that you've described.
Negative determination.
A negative determination.
That's my first motion.
Right,
Are
second,
we're not making any determinations as to the reasons.
I mean, where it is or anything. I think it's not marked anywhere, oh, you. Isn't, did I read in here, somewhere like you're 4 feet away from one sign that said, do not go beyond, is that
The open space sign.
Right there.
Yeah,
But
that's
the
40.
wetlands are off the property
Yeah.
and they were just, flagged as part of the development, but I didn't see any flagging.
Negative determination on the activities that are being conducted and no determination.
Correct. Thank you guys.
So
Much more.
That's second, moving a second, great, thank you for clarification. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, James,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
yeah,
Aye.
Marianne, Pam,
Aye.
okay, so you are good to go, continue to operate it as you will, please do not rake any leaves, let that fall naturally, if a tree or something comes down in the area and becomes unsafe, see Hannah. She'll help you determine what we need to do about that, but otherwise, have your kids enjoy the woods.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming in and following up on this. Have a good night. Okay, moving along, we have continued hearing for a notice of intent for Off Lake Street, Prospect Hill Village. This is the proposed construction of a 129 unit townhouse development, which would impact bordering vegetated wetland, bank, land under water bodies, and waterways bordering land subject to flooding and riverfront area. Louis Picozzi is the applicant, and Paul McManus, who is from Ecotech Inc. All the way from Worcester, has made a trip in. Thank you, Paul, for making it.
Well, I wasn't late. You're very efficient tonight.
There you go. You tried. Don't always succeed, but you tried. Okay.
Not to imply we aren't efficient. Other than that.
Yes, yes, as I say, we're trying, but my wife says all the time, I'm very trying.
Yeah, we do our best.
Yes. Okay, so Paul, I think one of the things I had heard, was that you would like to, you'd like to discuss the scope of the, in the portal, we have the peer review proposal and I know Hannah had done some, had received, sorry, from Lou yesterday or yesterday, I think it was.
It was a mix of yesterday and Monday.
On Monday, okay. The information, for, some information, but for that was requested, that was volume. So since we haven't really had a chance to see that information, you could refer to it, but we really won't be deciding anything about any of that. I don't even know all the information we'll provide. We'll have to take that up as we get it made available to us. But why don't you bring us up to speed with what you've been doing for that?
Yeah, sure, and we fully expected that there wouldn't be any significant action tonight. We did submit revised materials. I submitted a letter dated June 9. There were revised plans of the same date from Truax Engineering. My letter of June 9 provides some of the information that have been requested. We updated your bylaw NOI form, I call it, application for permit. We provided some specifics in terms of densities for the replication area. I had numbers, but folks had asked for kind of a translation. What's that relate to in terms of density? On, you know, in with, excuse me, within the replication area. We did that. Truex Engineering did some additional test pits, excuse me, that Rob Lucier witnessed. And as I said, Rob provided revised plans that include a lot of the detail that the commissioner requested in terms of the proposed brook crossing for the sewer, for example. Final, excuse me, final proposed treatment, as well as some details about methodology, and that sort of thing. So,
That was mostly in yesterday's/today's.
I'm sorry.
That was in Monday/yesterday's stuff?
Yes,
Okay. So
yes.
we haven't really seen that stuff, but thanks for updating on what was. the
Right,
stuff.
right. No, as I said, I realize it's been recent and you probably haven't had a chance to look at it.
Right.
I do see Rob Truex.
Yeah, so we're walking around, I didn't know that you were there, but Rob Trucks from Trucks Engineering's online, which is good, in case something can look at that. I briefly glanced over the BSC group proposal for the additional peer review scope as, Hannah and, do you actually talk to somebody there, Hannah?
We emailed,
But basically, okay.
yeah.
Who was your point person on that group, not wanting, from BSC, not wanting to assume that it was Amanda, but.
Yeah, it was
Right,
Amanda.
I wasn't, okay, because it was Paul, the other day, or last time. Okay, what did you want to bring up about that, or discuss about that?
I guess my only comment with respect to the BSC proposal is, you know, the scope was, you know, consistent with what they had been asked to do. The hours to do that seem reasonable. My question would be, they didn't specify who would do the work. And I did some quick arithmetic, and whoever's doing the work is getting paid 300 or 300, 3 1/4 an hour.
I did that math too.
Which, I'd love to be able to charge that. So, and, you know, as I said, they don't specify even the name or the credentials of the person doing that work at that rate, which in my experience is pretty steep.
Yeah, I'd have to double check. I can't say the last time I looked at what BSC was charging for a project, similar where they did somewhat of a breakout of number of hours at least, if you could get that, and who was doing the work at the time. Frankly, it was probably Matt Burns at the time, so it wouldn't be relevant to consider that far back a different person than potentially Amanda, or I assume maybe she or Paul Napick would be one of the two people involved in doing the actual work. But you're right, it doesn't say that. That's an omission that it should have been addressed, or should be addressed rather. We certainly, and you have the right to know as the that person paying the bill, what person can be doing this work, as that has come up in the past with people changing or needing to know information that one person from this company has gotten from another person and so forth. So that's a good point to have us clarify. What else? Anything else on the scope? I mean, you did say it seemed to be, the scope seemed to be what was asked for.
Yeah, and the hours that they, you know, that they
To look at that
supposed to do it, I think we're reasonable. That's always, I mean, I do peer review work myself, and it's always hard to figure out the hours to do that. So I don't think what they proposed is, in terms of hours, is unreasonable.
Okay.
I guess I would just ask, they estimated 4 hours for prep and attendance at a hearing, and which, you know, if things are, you know, things go efficiently for a hearing, and especially if they're remote, I would hope that they wouldn't charge the full 4 hours at 3 1/4 for, you know, for getting ready and being at a hearing for an hour.
Well, I was wondering how much of that was the actual, yeah, as you said, other than meetings time invested in doing the work that's necessary to be able to respond to those additional items on that they are within the scope of services. I'm just reading what this-
Well, you're getting to 3 1/4 by 3,700 divided by 12, is that correct?
Well, now, if you go on their page 3, they have $2,400 budget for task 1.1.
Yeah.
Which they
I'm
say,
looking at the breakdown.
which they say is 8 hours. Earlier, they say they budget 8 hours for that.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then they have 1,300 for 4 hours, which is, so they get 300 an hour for the first task, 3.25 for the second, when you do the arithmetic. At least I think I did that right.
Mhm.
I have the same.
Yes. Any other questions for the commission? I haven't compared this to the peer review letters 1 and 2, which is what part of the scope is to review the revised materials, to see how many items are in still outstanding items. Do you all know how many that comes to roughly off the top of your head? I don't know if you've done more looking at the proposal than I have probably, but as far as 1.1 and their scope of services says that they will review the outstanding items identified in peer review letters 1 and 2 and outline the change order request email from Hannah back on May 29th. So do you know how many items that is or which items they are right off the top of your head?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's my document,
Right.
and then it's the revised plans.
Yeah, but do you know if it's like 5 items, 10 items? I can't remember where.
We worked through that at the last hearing, didn't we?
Well, what we kind of talked about at the last hearing was that, there are a couple things that were still outstanding that they said they would provide some information for, and that Rob and the town planner, Rob, and I would, go through some of those details to see if some things had been hit or hadn't been hit, and what might require more review just based on what looked to be outstanding. And then we kind of came to a list of that there were 3 things that were, there was like the couple new crossing details that BSC had not gotten a chance to review, and and
Changes.
some of the
that they did.
hydrologic changes, so that's why
Right.
they went and did more testing. But those were just 3 areas where
Wildlife habitat assessment.
and that would be something that you would need to request.
That would be a separate, 3, this is a general. So I say the amended NOI and exhibit 3, the
If that's something.
hydrology and I'm thinking of the third bus.
Well, it's the 2 crossings.
Oh,
and then
2 crossings as,
of the replication area, once that crossing opens up, because it's a culvert.
What is the commission's thought on the wildlife habitat assessment?
I would like to see a wildlife habitat assessment.
Okay. Anybody else on the commission?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Is there a priority out there already, or
Beg pardon?
is there a priority habitat mapped out there currently, or?
It's not estimated a priority habitat for rare species. I checked the most recent map just recently.
So there's nothing to mark, in other words, on the map of the site, the proposed.
That's correct. There's no map.
So perhaps what James is asking, is there anything marked on the plans that we have?
No, I was just,
Or are you saying there's nothing out there?
I was trying to refamiliarize myself with whether or not there was listed.
Anything in that area? Gotcha.
habitat.
But what wouldn't be Jonah,
Hmm.
Northern Longer.
They're not
So,
listed.
yeah, the habitat evaluation that you're contemplating would be more traditional, quote, what the regs define as important wildlife habitat. And the DEP has their habitat evaluation manual. So the regs identify thresholds for various resource areas. If you're above a threshold for a resource area, excuse me, then the regs trigger a habitat evaluation. We're not above any of those thresholds. And with the one sort of exception, which is for riverfront area, which says that if there's an alteration above 5,000 square feet, of riverfront area, of undeveloped riverfront area, then the issuing authority may ask for it.
What are we at for the riverfront?
I'm sorry,
What are we at for the riverfront on the site? How much over the 5,000 are we?
because,
But that's fine, but you knew that, because you were saying it with the exception of that, sorry, I don't want to put up funds here, but. Since
yeah,
that is one area, I mean,
It says total riverfront area is 483,780. Yeah, how much would be, right, that, I'm just rolling down.
so the proposed, the, we're about, real quick, about 25,000
Yeah.
square feet in rough numbers.
about 5 times
Mhm.
the figure along the riverfront.
So, but I think the first number is very germane to that, because the regs talk about, and the manual really stresses that, that, you know, an effect on some habitat, because quite literally, every time you cut down a tree, you're affecting some habitat. So the manual stresses the notion that it has to be important in the context of the site and the total resource area and the total habitat on the site. So, you know, we are at, we're at, in rough numbers, 500,000 square feet riverfront on the site, and we're at 25,000, very rough numbers, of proposed alteration.
Yeah, but
Okay.
that's just if you're comparing the size of the site to the size of the alteration. If you're comparing it to the 5,000 square feet, it's far above that.
Right, that's one way of looking at it. The other question is, where in that 25,000 square feet that is being impacted? Is it, you know, really undisturbed areas, and what kind of stuff is in there? And so you either do the wildlife evaluation to try to determine that, or make the decision that you don't feel that it's necessary based on sidewalk peer review or somebody else assessing it. I don't know how you can decide whether that relatively, which I think Paul is making a point, without saying it, 20, do you know the percentage, since you gave the 25 out of, roughly out of 480? I'm not gonna do the math.
Percent, so it's 25,000 out of 500,000 is. Who's good at math? 25 into 500
Oh, Siri, that was a good question for Siri.
is
Oh, 5.
5%.
I think.
Yeah, 25, 50 and 500 would be 10%, half of that's 5%.
Right.
Thank you.
Would buffer zones be included in that? You know, we've got.
No,
about
this is
3 acres.
for,
No, I know, that's just the riverfront, right? That would, but, so the buffer zones aren't included in that?
the buffer zone, the wildlife habitat guidance is very explicit that it's just for resource areas proposed to be altered.
So if we're not altering a buffer zone, then the answer is no, it's not. I think that's what they're saying. I know Pam, you expressed your opinion, Marianne, I'd like to hear from the other board members, what do you think about this? You have an idea of the scope of the area. So are you saying that there, even if the threshold is not exceeded, because the threshold is not exceeded, you're saying these other areas on the site that might be impacted, or resource areas other than the riverfront, would not be reviewable if we are already going on site for the riverfront? They would not, the DEP is not gonna say, well, you should not go look at this, that.
No, that's correct. If we had, for example, if we had proposed to alter, you know, more than 50 linear feet of bank habitat that was found to be important habitat, that would be a threshold for kicking us in relative to bank. And then there's, you know, there's also threshold for land subject to flooding. For BVW, there's not a strict threshold per se. What the policy says is that there's a presumption, which is certainly valid in this point, in this context. There's a presumption that you have to replicate for the BVW anyway. So therefore you'd be replicating those habitat features. There's one possible exception to that is if you had a limited project crossing, for example, that for some reason, you know, there wasn't replication, you couldn't do it or whatever. At that point, the BVW would then trigger Yeah, it's not clear, but in my opinion, in that context, the BVW impact would trigger a habitat evaluation for BVW.
Throughout the whole site, not just that one area, or just that one area that couldn't be done.
Uh,
Just the one area that couldn't be done would be triggered to have habitat review because it couldn't be done, not the whole, not BVW throughout the whole site.
no, this, I'm just saying that.
No, I'm just asking for confirmation, if that's the case. You're saying that it might trigger if you couldn't do it in one area of BVW. And therefore, it would trip the threshold, it would trip the need to do a habitat, wildlife habitat assessment. That habitat assessment, wildlife habitat assessment would only be at that one area, not throughout the entire site that has BVW, correct?
Correct, you're assessing the quote important habitat
How,
in areas, in resource areas that you propose to alter.
how do they, who determines whether the riverfront, in this case, sticking to this site in this project, and the 5,000, I'm sorry, 25,000 square feet that is being impacted, proposed being impacted, who decides whether any or all that is important to the site?
Well, there's a two-step process in the habitat guidance. There's Appendix A, which is fairly brief. And then if you trigger anything in Appendix A, then you have to go to Appendix B. And that's a multi-page thing and it lists a whole series of important habitat characteristics. And if you have important habitat characteristics, you have to document them. There's a requirement that a person doing the habitat evaluation have certain credentials and experience.
Oh, it's done as part of that. You don't have to have that determine some of it is important before you do the habitat assessment, correct?
Well,
It's part of the process of it. Yes.
you literally, when I do it, I literally take the forms out in the field.
Mhm.
And, you find your area, you get yourself oriented, and you take your forms out in the fields. And it's a long checklist. And you go through the checklist. And if you find something that, oh, okay, I'm checking X, whatever characteristic it is, then you have to go and look at the remainder of that resource area on the site and decide whether the characteristic that you're proposing to impact is rare and unusual on the site or otherwise significant on the site in the context of the site. And obviously there's some judgment involved in that. But the idea is, you figure out, you have a whole list of characteristics and, a lot of them, are obviously no, pretty easy to dismiss. Banks for cliff swallows, I'm sure, certainly we don't have any of those. And then, so you go through that list, as I said, and if you do have something that's important, then the next step is putting it in context. And if that context indicates that, no, what you have is kind of rare and unusual there, then the next step in the process is to say, okay, can I mitigate for that somehow? Based upon whatever that characteristic is. If you can, then you propose to mitigate for it. If you can't, then you're left to the situation that I have an important wildlife habitat impact that's unmitigated. And then that's then incumbent upon you to say, time out, we got a problem. So,
Having heard that, the commission feel that they want to have that information gathered, because obviously we don't know that yet.
I would say yes, as the issuing authority, don't remember that phrase. When we reclassified that street as intermittent, which now means they don't need to check 9 licenses for their culvert, which means they don't have to be cut.
Right.
And there's no way to
Very
reclassify
good.
that back to
Could
current.
you say that a little louder?
So he can't, that was that side of the table.
Less loud.
I also can't hear you, Ariane, sorry.
We're the issuing authority, so we can make that determination. I'm for it. And then I know that this decision is related to this, but already closed. But when we were the issuing authority to determine that the stream was intermittent. That meant that they didn't need a chapter 91 license for the culvert for work with land underwater. And now they don't have a state action that qualifies them for NEPA. We don't have that checked out.
What was the name of the stream that was determined for, do you remember? Oh, so you remember the name of the stream that we dealt with two streams right around the same time, if you and Lou?
Intermittent is Hoag Brook, Hoag.
Quick was the other one on Blackstone area, street area, correct?
I didn't know that the other one actually had a name.
Yeah, she said, yeah.
Hoag Brook, I
Oh, it's
know.
the one on Prospect, okay, well, Prospect, okay. Additional questions, thoughts on this particular point, because this would affect the scope of the BSC proposal. That's not included in this. Did not include that, okay, did not include assessment, so that would be in addition to 3,700
What was that?
proposal. They're estimating about $1,200 for 4 hours of effort. I assume they have someone, which we would want to question also when we talk about credentials and so forth, just because I don't think we've ever had anybody do for us a wildlife assessment. What the qualifications are of whoever's going to be doing that for BSC as part of this. Because of like,
Wildlife assessment, as you just noted, is not in that.
correct, they say that in the Hannah census,
So they'd have to revise their proposal.
right.
They
Was there
they didn't
reason-
feel comfortable like not having any information about what that assessment would entail. They didn't feel comfortable giving a official scope for
So
that.
there was discussion about it.
Right.
Yeah, just as in case that you requested it at this meeting, that they could potentially provide additional information, but because it hadn't been requested by you guys at that point, and they didn't have any information to review, they didn't feel comfortable giving it.
So, you know, when you say in this case, having just heard what Paul said about the 5,000, I'm sorry, 25,000. With the 5,000 triggering point, but the 25,000 estimated ballpark, riverfront impact areas, that is what they were looking for the scope before they could come up with an assessment? Or would they be looking for more detail about what we want? Because I wouldn't know what to say we want them to do exactly for wildlife habitat assessment. I wouldn't want to leave something out.
They should have been able to provide an estimate because they know the resource area on the site already. So they know what they would be looking at.
They just didn't provide it.
They just didn't, right?
But it sounds like because we didn't, from what Hannah's saying, and she's been in touch with me,
Because we didn't ask.
because we didn't ask, or we didn't give them enough information to, oh, I thought that's what I was hearing, maybe I misheard.
Well, I think it was a combination
Okay.
of both.
I
So
would
we
think
didn't ask and they didn't scope.
the
it.
standard wildlife habitat assessment has a laundry list of
Well, but
default scope.
The scope of it is in the manual.
right, but knowing where it's riverfront only on the site, I think James is saying they should know it was only riverfront they would be doing, whether they knew it was 25,000 square feet that proposed values or not. I would assume by this point in time,
So even if it was more than one resource area, they've had the project now for, God, I don't even know how many months now. They know the resource area on the site. Unless we specifically said, do not provide scope for
something.
habitat
Wildlife
estimation or evaluation, then they should have either anticipated it, especially if it came up in conversation. I'm a little confused about their comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So because it's not required, it's something the issuing authority can determine, and they hadn't determined it at that point. They brought
Okay,
it to our attention.
so it's Paul's position that we don't meet the threshold or but pass the threshold to require it.
Anywhere but the riverfront. The riverfront we do. The other resource areas on the site, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, you're saying we're under the 5,000
Well, it's different thresholds.
4 linear feet.
Various,
37 bank.
so let me be clear on that. So most of the resource areas have clear thresholds. For example, bank, 50 feet of important bank habitat. If you exceed that, then, you know,
Oh, you
50
trip.
feet or 10%, whichever is less. Obviously, the 50 feet is less than 10% of the site. So if you exceed that of important bank habitat, then that triggers a habitat evaluation for bank. There's a similar for land subject to flooding, for land underwater, et cetera. We don't trip any of those. The BVW, I feel confident we're covered there because we're doing a very big replication area. The riverfront, the threshold is not black and white like it is for bank, for example. And it says, if the alteration proposed is over 5,000, the issuing authority may require a habitat evaluation for riverfront. So that's it, I'm very comfortable, that's where we are. We're down to that one question. Is
I can understand BSC being guarded with proposing scope that isn't absolutely necessary, given the way Lou has charged them with spiking it or not giving him his fair value. So I can understand, while I may not agree, I can at least understand why they might be
Unless they're asked.
conservative in loading it up with scope. So if we're past that point, I guess the question on the table is, what do we want?
So at this point in time, if it requires, whether it's an addendum or an additional, or a change to the proposed scope from BSC that they provided for us for the 30, I think there's 3,700 total, with the peer reviews for those stuff and evaluating the changes and that have been made in the letter 1 and 2.
And we'd have at least 3 members that want it.
Yeah.
There's also an alternative where we want the assessment done by the applicant. And not necessarily need to have BSC peer review that assessment.
could I make a comment about?
Sure.
I would, it seems like you're leaning towards requiring this.
Sounds like.
I would ask that you ask BSC to answer my question about who's gonna do this and what is their rate? And is that rate the same rate that they charge to their private clients? If it's Paul Knappich, does Paul Knappich charge, everybody else's private clients 300 or 325 an hour for that work? Because I'm guessing that the answer to that is no. And that if it's Knappich, that, he could do this work for this number. Include this work for this number.
Include the habitat review in the fee stated requested already.
That's my guess, because I haven't seen anybody charging that amount of money for someone like me. We just don't get it. We don't get that rate.
And Hannah has been doing, and be continuing to do some evaluations of comparable groups to BSC for environmental services, just as a part of, doing due diligence, number 1, and number 2, we haven't, I think, assessed where we are with asking for this level of services from BSC that we may need going forward, and their ability to do that, given their staffing and so forth, situation that may be in flux and so on. So we will be perhaps getting a reading, so as a temperature, so to speak, of what is being done out there from a couple of other sources too, which is good. But even if we weren't, I would still want to ask who's doing this for BSC, what are their qualifications for doing it? And is that, if that's the same person who's doing potentially the rest of that study, their scope of work, fine, that's one thing. If it's 2 different people, how are they coordinating their communication and information? Because got a little bit of an issue with, making sure we get that in a timely manner and in a coordinated manner. Let's see what they say, but yeah, so the first question is, do we want to ask somebody, right, we don't have to vote for it per se, we can just turn around and ask BSC for that information and the quote and see where we're going to go from there. Sorry, it sounds,
Yeah. Initially, yes.
Providing that.
I know Pam's still agreeing on that, that probably, okay. All right, so,
We get 2 things, providing one in the proposal,
That rate and the staff level that is performing at that rate.
credentials and fee.
Yeah.
credential fee, so what exactly is being done for that 8 + 4 hours of the original scope, the 3,700 plus this additional potentially 1,200, which is $300 in 4 hours, $300 an hour. So potentially the same person, maybe not, different rates, different people in the company, I don't know, but yeah, how that is structured and if it is not comparable to what is being done for even other towns, those private versus public clients, if that's not the standard rate, then why? And can we?
I'm not sure, in a brief reading, they address overages clearly. Yes, they do, or you're agreeing with me. What's that?
You're asking if the SEA
That-
really applies for it or in this proposal?
In addition to credentials rate should be. What happens if you go over the 8 and 4?
I think it's.
Well, yeah, and
And what's
a
the
rate,
fee there?
and that's, I mean, we always say, you know,
You
this
know-
is our scope. If we go over, you know, we can do it at this rate.
I believe that was one of Lou's criticisms.
I believe in the proposal on the.
And I think that's a very fair criticism
Terms
of
of
myself. I mean,
conditions.
being someone who writes these proposals.
Yeah.
Well, I'm bringing it up,
I'm sorry.
which is why I'm bringing it up.
If it's not in their additional terms and conditions, it's like 6 pages, I'm not gonna take time looking at it now.
Right.
That's a good point. We should verify that. Okay, so Hannah has been busily making note of that, right? Because I'm not writing down, but. So I think between Hannah and I, we can get that information from BSC. And bring that back to the next meeting. I mean, we can share it electronically if we have something, we can do that with just disseminating information, but we won't be discussing it until the next meeting. See if that seems reasonable, but the information is partly to see if, you know, we aren't, see, your client is paying the bill, we've made that clear. However, they are limited in what they can do to impact who we pick and, exactly what the scope of work is. You can't be totally unreasonable scope of work, or why should you pay for it? But, we also, think, a responsibility, fiscal responsibility and a due diligence responsibility to make sure as the authority, what did you say? Governing body? Responsible. Issuing, thank you. I knew that. Issuing authority to make sure that we're not forcing applicants and their clients to, representatives of their clients to pay an unfair burden, or some, you know, from paying a company that's charging 4 times the rate. I'm not saying they are. Any company, 4 times the rate or 5 times the rate or whatever exorbitant amount might be charged by some companies unscrupulous or whatever. I'm not saying that BSC is by any means, I don't know if it's slander here, but we want to make sure that if the fee is in line, great, we can say that. Hey, it's expensive, but that's what other companies seem to be charging too for the same kind of services. If it's not, then we need to see why that's the case and decide if that's something we want to continue with. But let's see where we go from there. I think that's where we're at now.
Okay. The only other comment I would add, just real quick, Mr. Chairman, in terms of, you know, as you said, we can't dictate from this side of the table who you get and all. But I know, you know, Paul has been out there, he's seen the site, he's familiar with the site, he's familiar with the plans. I would hope that for efficiency's sake, that we wouldn't be getting someone who's gonna start from ground zero.
Right, I don't think this, based on the amount of time that's been put into this site and so forth, that we would want to do that necessarily. And even though that's just the environmental side of things and there's the whole engineering planning board side, I'm gonna step a little off the track, not too far, because I just need to know, and Rob stepped out unfortunately, because he was the one I was gonna look at. Maybe he's gonna step back in a second, but do you know in general how parallel tracked are you on the planning board side? Has your client given you any indication?
I
Because
don't, maybe Rob, can you answer that
Oh, yeah,
question?
good.
Status on planning board status?
Yeah, I think we're getting close because this last round of revisions, we came out of a joint meeting between Rob Lucier and Hannah, myself and Paul.
okay.
And I don't think there's much left for the planning board, to be honest. I think we're pretty close to probably in the next meeting or so, they're probably gonna start drafting a decision.
Okay, because, I don't know if it's true or not, but if the applicant has decided that he does not wish to continue and allow the commission to continue beyond, say, the next meeting, for example, and wants to close the hearing, and have a decision made, we have not, I don't think, ever closed a hearing that is jointly being reviewed by the planning board and the conservation commission for a project without both boards being at the same point.
Right.
Mainly for the plan of record. So Rob, just because you came back in, I asked, and Rob online here, Drax has responded that he thinks that the boards are very close as far as decision points along. So if it becomes the case at the next hearing, for example, or the one after that, or whatever, we get to the point that the applicant has decided that they feel that they're done and do not want to give their approval to continue the hearing to the next meeting because we may have been done our part in jointly agreed that we've done our part. As you've seen many times in meetings, we don't close for a conservation commission hearing that's jointly being reviewed by the planning board, unless the planning board has a final set of plans too, because we're on one set of plan of record. And if you change something, as we give applicants the information, I know Paul knows this, so does Lou. If we gave the applicant the go-ahead and signed off on a plan for the Conservation Commission and the planning board changes a road, and suddenly there's a drainage issue that's going into wetlands area now, we've closed our portion of the project. At the very least, that causes all kinds of problems. At the very worst, it causes really big problems at the very best. That could be problematic if that's not really on the same track. And usually the applicants for projects that we're jointly reviewing, and Rob, disagree if you ever heard this in your time, have understood that and want to see both projects, both boards, Conservation Commission and Planning Board, close and issue something, not have to wait for one or the other, but understand that if one is a little ahead of the other or behind the other, then that's a waiting game that's only being done because we want to have that one set of plans.
I mean, we had another project that was going through the same thing. That
Eventually.
triangle one that like, we were like, looks great. Wow, great job. And then we're like, we'll see you at the next meeting and then continued for eternity.
Right, but
Yeah, that. I won't speak to that project. I think that may have been a little disingenuous with the initial statement to the Conservation Commission that they were at the 1 yard line with the planning board. But anyway, I would agree with you though, Ariana and Mr. Chair, that we want both reviews to run concurrently with each other. I would agree with what Rob Truax mentioned that, we're pretty much in line with the Conservation Commission as far as the review goes. I know, from the public's perspective, there is a hearing for this scheduled for tomorrow night. We did have a bit of a changeover with the board, so the intent for that is Lou is requesting a continuance at tomorrow night's meeting, and it'll be a similar situation as previous where there was a new member. There'll be a re-notification to the abutters to get a full voting quorum, and I anticipate that we'll be meeting in July.
are you gonna have to deal with the Mullen rule? And have a review of the whole project because you have new members on that might need to be required for the quorum, or you will have quorum? without
That's
that?
so the way it works is if you have a new member or new members, in order to get them to be voting members and part of the quorum for the vote, an applicant can re-notify and re-advertise, which is what you'll be doing. And then what happens is they basically start from the very beginning with an overview of what exactly the trajectory of the project has been, including, overviews of the peer review and such. So at that meeting, it will be a nice refresher for really everybody, because this project has been quite long on both conservation and planning side. But we are, I think on the planning side, we are nearing to the end. A lot of the comments that have been raised, Lou has responded to. I'll leave it at that, so.
Yeah, fair enough, okay. We'll see.
Does
what
Pam have a motion she wants to make?
Who wants to make?
Pam,
Pam, I don't.
Did you say Pam?
yes. Aren't you gonna
Um,
make a motion to request something?
I want to make a motion to request a wildlife habitat evaluation.
Okay, sure.
So moved.
I guess we can vote,
We're already doing it.
I understand we're doing that, I'm not sure that we need to do it as it is something that we would be asking our peer reviewers to do. Did we make a motion for the last scope that we did, last time, which generated this proposal?
Well, are we
We're getting
asking
consensus on whether or
PSC
not
to get a scope, or are you
Asking
asking them to?
them to complete their habitat evaluation. And then we have to decide if BSC needs to peer review, which I think the commission is leaning on, says yes, but with the caveats of confirming what their rate structure is.
How long would it take you guys to do the peer review for the road project?
I can probably have something to Hannah in a week.
No, I meant time wise actually doing it, I'm comparing that to the 4 hours that they're estimating here. The peer review of it.
Oh, peer review of it.
Yeah, no, not, you do peer review, you would do the assessment.
Yeah,
They
oh,
would peer
I
review.
misunderstood the question, so.
I'm just trying to get a sense, if we asked, I thought that the commission was actually thinking of asking someone else to do the peer, do wildlife.
No, we have.
You mean a different peer review group?
No, I just want to make sure, so now that I'm clear on the reverse side, okay, that's fine, your sense is 4 hours seem reasonable for peer review of that scope, that you guys would do?
That's
More than
more than reasonable.
More than that, okay, let's make sure. So if we heard somebody else, from the essay for it, I was thinking that's bare minimum, that wouldn't necessarily be the case from somebody who's done this kind of stuff. Okay, so you said overall, within a week or so, you could have that potentially.
I think
Okay.
so.
So yes, I guess we are asking, and I guess a motion wouldn't be, I guess.
May not be necessary.
May not.
I don't think we have to have a formal vote, we just have to have a consensus.
Yeah, I mean, I can look around and say, do you all agree? Does anybody disagree? And that probably is fine. So I think we are looking to do the wildlife management, the wildlife habitat assessment of the riverfront. Since it does exceed the 5,000 square foot and we are the issuing authority, so we can, request that. And I think we are requesting it. So
Understood.
Paul can act on that. He can relay that to the applicant. If there's an issue, certainly let us know. And we, in the meantime, will be doing some due diligence, finding out who's going to be reviewing this, what their qualifications are, talk about rates and so forth. And I will do that, and we'll relay if there's any issues with that between now and the next meeting. And between now and that time, we potentially would have that assessment to be reviewed as part of the overall. Does anybody have any other comments about the actual peer review proposal for the rest of it, the other $3,700 worth of?
Well, connected to the habitat assessment, we have to confirm that whoever is providing that review also is qualified to do that. Right.
Right, well, that's what I mean, for
Right. So
qualifications.
there's standards for someone who can complete the assessment, so I would think it necessary to have the person peer reviewing that to also have those qualifications.
They could
So
have done
who's
this.
gonna do the habitat review? Paul?
No, he's doing.
Or
the
BSC?
He's doing the assessment, and then we're saying, do we want to pay BSC to review
Okay,
Paul's
Paul's
assessment?
doing the assessment,
Yes.
the physical assessment,
Yes.
BSC will peer review
If
that.
we tell them to do so, because they have held out, as you see from that email from Hannah. Because if we.
Well, do we wanna try and answer that question now,
What?
since we're in it?
I think it depends on the results of the assessment, for
Yeah,
me,
he-
to be honest.
Paul finds nothing there, or Paul finds tons of things there in the wildlife assessment, that could decide whether we want to ever do these.
Is it not conflict of interest to have client, more or less, and that's who you work for?
Well,
Do a self-assessment?
well, that's why we would have somebody, we would decide whether we want to make the client pay for peer review to double check basically and provide a independent.
Okay,
Is
so,
it in this-
so in the peer review, BSC would go back out.
I don't know, would they? They spend about 4 hours reviewing / doing whatever they would do. That's another question we can ask them. Would they bother going out? And they would probably say it depends on what they see in the assessment.
Unless there's an extremely detailed photo log, they're gonna have to go on site.
I would expect so.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so we'll find out.
I'm up to speed.
What's that?
That's
Well,
not, that's
Part of it,
That's a different,
that's a different scope item.
they didn't scope this out.
Well, no, it's in the email from,
Habitat.
in the habitat assessment. Says, the quote from BSC that Hannah put in this email a while back was, please note, we did not include the wildlife habitat assessment piece in this change order. We will need more information about the scope and materials before we can confidently, I'm not sure what materials I mean. Before we can confidently assess the effort and fees required. However, we expect it to be about $1,200, assuming 4 hours of effort. Hopefully that'll help with the discussion during the hearing, which is what we're having now. It helps us wonder a number of questions, which we will be asking BSC about this to get more information. And
What page is that?
this is,
Looks like
second
it's-
page of her email. Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, that's. Is that in the proposal or is that in the?
an email from Hannah to the commission summarizing some
When I
information.
requested it as a supplemental to that in case they required
Okay,
it,
so,
they responded that they wouldn't put it in the scope.
okay, all right, so it's
It was
just saying,
just
it's in the email, it's not in this document.
Correct.
Okay,
It's in the email she sent out.
that's what Mr. Kohler is trying to find it too.
You sent on Monday. About them not gonna, well,
they'll be able to review it well.
Yeah, well, we'll try to get a sense of that when we talk to them about, what is, how much of that for us on the field, how much is for, paperwork and whatever. Who's doing it, their qualifications.
Light through the roof run area.
Oh, you think it should be a lot more than 4 hours?
Oh,
Paul's assessment of looking at peer review, do you include walking around on the site in your estimation of this was more than enough when I've asked you peer review 4 hours?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, as I said, it's a long checklist. Most of the things they're gonna look at, that I check no, and they're gonna say, yeah, sure. And then there's a few things, that, in that type of environment that you're gonna potentially, red flag and look at that and,
They're not starting from scratch like Paul will be, so like he said, they're gonna be able to, half that checklist is gonna be irrelevant. Only thing that they're gonna be focusing on is written from. It's like if someone that's competent to do a delineation, have someone go reline it or confirm the line, they see the line, unless the person who did the original delineation doesn't know how to delineate a wetland, it's not a
but
law.
they still can drive it. That's billable.
Are they billing travel time?
They have to.
They should.
It's a law. Law.
no, we do, I mean, I include travel time.
DOT law.
Well, that's something we won't know. We can speculate on how they can, or else we can talk to them about it. So we'll talk to them about it because that really doesn't affect our decision to other than your confidence level, which is important.
I mean, maybe that's why their hourly rate is so high, because they're lumping that other stuff into it, but they shouldn't be doing it.
But you don't need to pay someone $300 an hour to drive.
And I will say in general, whether it's lawyers or other types of people who charge by the hour, consultants in particular, you can, if you're really good and the market demands it, or you're in demand enough, you can try for as much as you want. Consultants aren't held to a union rate or anything like that. However, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't charge a reasonable rate and one that's proportional to the industry. So if there is an industry rate, we don't know what it is yet, or we may never know. We'll try to get a sense of that.
I'll say, echoing this, there's principal managers that handle some of my projects and they don't get paid that.
I've seen lawyers bill $900 an hour.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not
lawyers
paying
are
that bill
crazy.
because I wasn't at the time, but I saw the bill. It's like, wow. Anyway, okay.
When is your next meeting?
The 25th.
The 25th. So I will look, unless anybody has any other points or
Well,
questions.
I had a question about the NOI supplement that came in. Actually two, there were requests for waivers. One is for tree cutting, but I'm assuming that was tree counting. I'll need clarification and want to know the rationale. The other is for fill and grading. They're requesting a waiver. And so again, what's the rationale for requesting the waiver?
Is that just, is that sort of Monday, Tuesday stuff that just came in? No.
This is on, I think this is dated 9th.
Oh.
Wait,
June 9th?
no, yeah, June 9th.
This week, okay.
Yeah,
It's
June
just the
9th.
buffer, the updated.
Yes, the updated supplement to the NOI.
Town bylaw, NOI.
They're requesting two waivers, so maybe this is the time, but. It's where, it's on the same document that showed, the wetlands. Riverfront area impact, total site riverfront. 1 to 200 foot north area,
But I don't remember.
just prior to
Like,
that.
I can all read,
Yeah.
Prior after that, I mean,
There's a section under project impacts, it's number 9. Buffer zone setbacks, tree cutting and fill and grading. I assume. But I want clarification, is that tree counting? And it says a waiver has been requested and filling and grading and a waiver of this information requested.
Would you like me to comment on that?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Sure. So the first one, buffer setback, we're proposing to do a crossing so that it's 0. I guess I could have put a 0.
Yep.
The tree cutting, your regs, talk about actually a tally of of the trees. And we talked about this before, and my view of that is, I guess I just don't really see where that's germane and worth, having out there to survey individual trees. I mean, the areas are on the plan, we have the tree lines on the plan. And asking for a waiver, because I don't think realistically it provides meaningful information that you need to make the decision. Now, you may differ in that, but that's the basis of the request, is that, I don't think, whether, in an area the size of this room, whether there's, 30 trees or 40 trees that are being cut down, I don't see that changes the calculus in terms of what it is that's being proposed. And with the fill and grading, I think it's the same, it's the same idea. I mean, it was a gravel pit out there. There's, you have all the existing and proposed grades on the plan. It's clear from the plans what is proposed to happen. And again, I don't see that in terms of evaluating effects on resource areas, whether, whether there's a perfect balance, or whether there's an import or an export of material. I don't understand how that would change your view of, how many trucks are coming and or going, how that would change your view of effects on the wetland. So that's my view of it. That's the basis for the waiver, and that's what is being requested, that you waive that particular information.
With the fill and grading, also, if it was not waived, you would have to, not just square footage or volume of fill, net volume of fill, but what areas is a net minus versus what area is being filled versus where they're being graded versus what area is losing and being taken from, because some of the site, having walked a fair bit of it, is still obviously an old sand pit. I mean, you're walking over sand dunes basically with almost nothing growing on them, or very few trees or whatever around them. Other areas don't look like they've been dug up in many, many years, and there are large trees in the areas that have grown up or been left undisturbed if their area was impacted. So some parts of the site, if it was being filled and graded, for example, wouldn't really matter a whole lot. If it's a sand dune before grading it out, net loss or gain wouldn't, I think, matter to the commission as much as, or to me, I mean, anyway. But if it's an area that's being graded or filled that is more sensitive or less disturbed, I would say absolutely it would impact my decision.
I agree with all that,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Where I think what I see as the disconnect is that, because you're talking about the existing condition relative to the proposed condition, which is entirely appropriate in my view. What I'm saying is whether that takes trucks rolling in or trucks rolling out to get to that change, which way the trucks are going, to my mind, is not germane. The change in condition is certainly germane. Whether it's going from, sand dune to vegetated or vegetated to, a road, that's certainly germane. But whether it takes, as I said, whether it takes a cut or a fill to make that change, I don't understand why that would be meaningful to you.
I don't understand why it wouldn't be too difficult to just do like your gut fill analysis in CAD and just provide that to us.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I don't understand why it would be so difficult to do a cut fill analysis in CAD and just provide that to us.
Rob, can you explain
Yeah,
that?
no, I can, absolutely. Well, to do that analysis is very costly. It's not something that's easy to do. You have to you go through the whole site. And that will be done at some point in time, and it will most likely be done by the contractor who's going to build the site, because they're going to want to know that. And they'll end up putting all that effort in. And actually, we talk about the cut and fills on the site. Your jurisdiction doesn't go all over the site. So we don't really have to provide cuts and fills for the entire site to the commission. It would only be the areas within the jurisdiction of the commission, as far as I understand. And
Yeah.
that would be more of a planning board thing to ask about cuts and fills over the entire site.
Just an example.
So I guess I would say, is there is there something about that you're trying to understand? That, you know, I guess I'm asking if you could explain that to me, because as I said, I fully understand the question and your viewpoint of the changing character of various parts of the landscape within your jurisdiction. That's what you're all about. But again, as I said, you know, whether it takes, you know, a cut or a fill to accomplish that change, to my view, isn't really important.
So if I may share my opinion, I appreciate your response. So what I'm concerned about is the impact to our areas of concern. So the wetlands, buffer zones, that kind of thing. I'm not worried about the sand pits in those areas that are outside of our jurisdiction anyway, because I agree with you, it's irrelevant. But as I'm trying to make an assessment in determining what the impact will be to buffer zones, to wetlands, to riparian areas, understanding, you know, how many trees are gonna be cleared will affect the water in that area. It affects the groundwater, right? An adult tree, according to Purdue, absorbs it up to 40,000 gallons of water a year. So if there's 3, it's not a big deal. If there's 300, I'm exaggerating, then it could have an impact on the wetlands and the surrounding areas. So that's all I'm looking for, is a characterization, so we can understand what that impact would be in those areas that are germane to our jurisdiction.
And we also have a bylaw that allows us to require replacement of certain trees depending on their trunk diameter. So how would we know which ones to replace if we don't have information?
I agree with Don and I agree with Ariane. Having more information helps us quantify the impacts and make a correct decision for the health of the wetlands in Bellingham.
And I personally don't think, in my own opinion, is that, you know, it should be the entire area. It's the areas that are germane to our jurisdiction.
I'd like to expand on that cut fill analysis, especially where it provides a piece of information that changes the elevations, which in turn changes the flow rate of water entering the wetlands, even areas outside our jurisdiction. And the position that a cut fill analysis is costly, every estimator bidding the job's gonna do it in order to determine the price to charge. So it's not that hard. How critical is it? I'm not arguing that point, but you asked for an explanation. I think those are the only points I wanted to make.
Okay. We don't have to make a decision or vote on this week, soon, the next meeting, but I want to make sure anybody else who has the points, this is it, or been brought up, James or Pam, any other
I
thoughts?
mean, just to add on to the fill thing, and I know that was provided on the plan, but you guys have floodplains, land subject to flooding, and you have to provide compensatory storage, which you mentioned on the plans. That is part of the fill. Those are the areas that are gonna be filled. That's the stuff that we need to know.
James, and by having it, it creates focus. Like, okay, what's going on in this area with that? It's additional information for the evaluation on a changing topography. Okay, Pam, anything else?
I would just say if it has no impact, then why would they need a waiver for it? Why would it be in our regulations? I think it's good to have this information.
All right, well, we can work on a response to the waiver request as we move forward. We don't have to, as I said, do anything about it tonight. No major decision we expect tonight, but Paul, thank you for providing some.
Last question, somewhat in agreement with Paul on the trees. If they're all coming out, knowing what they are, would only provide us benefit if we are asking for a replication quantity in another area. So, are we doing that? We just,
I mean, wouldn't it depend on what they tell us? And to Don's point, there's a huge difference between 3 trees and 300 trees.
I'm sure it's more like 300 trees on the site that are coming down, not 3.
yeah, I'd be shocked if it was right.
Yeah.
The tree houses out of this, on the site.
I mean, there is a have you folks had a chance to see the landscape plan for the project? There is a landscape plan out there. There is a lot of tree planting, buffers, et cetera, being done on the site. You know, there's street trees, there's a lot of plantings going in.
I don't think we have.
We may not have a copy on
I
hearing.
can ask Rob for that, but I haven't seen.
Yeah, it's been submitted to the planning board.
Oh, this has been broken, all right, that's kind of what I'm seeing that. I will ask if there's a number of people in the room who've been sitting here very patiently. I know this one person is an applicant for a hearing that's coming up in a moment. But is there anybody here who came specifically tonight to hear about Prospect Hill Village and the status of it, that has a question from the public or something that they would like to talk about now?
Pauline Aiello, like you are.
Yes.
I know that I've been going to both meetings here in the planning board.
Mhm.
And one of the things is that they want an access road to Lake Street. And that's in a wetlands area. This whole area is in a water resource district. Right? Okay, now, our town of Bellingham, chapter 235, section 1 says no person shall remove, fill, dredge, or alter any resource areas or land in or under such areas, and it goes on, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. Well, they're proposing to put the road in. And that would go over a wetland area that floods out onto Lake Street. The culvert under Lake Street is right there, so there's that river that goes down there. Wouldn't that change all of that? Is that not what this Wetlands Protection Act is?
Yeah, a portion of it, I think, yes, does apply to this. Some of this is planning board related, specifically the roads and the stormwater and how if they're going through an area that's a wetlands. Does affect it, so I'm thinking it's a combination, it's not.
I understand what you're saying, that it's park planning board, but I'm just specifically asking you, does that affect the wetlands and conservation?
Well, the road going through wetlands certainly is gonna impact the wetlands, absolutely, and that area of Lake Street, the dip, so to speak, right there that you're talking about that gets flooded periodically.
Right.
We have some members who have taken pictures of ducks.
I have
swim-
some,
Swimming across the road exactly, but really close to it. So that is something that is a concern of, I know a number of members on the commission, and we have yet to get into with the applicant and how they plan dealing with the conservation related side of things. Planning board, I think, is also looking at it, not your head, at that road access onto Lake Street and how that would impact and the water be dealt with in a way that is acceptable and what is the impact of that and so on. So that's an area that is, as part of this project, particularly being focused on for that.
because I know, like, I've got pictures that inside, where you walk and there's a pond, and then you keep walking and there's more water and more water. And when he spoke, it was right after the drought, and he said it's dry. Well, it was dry. We had a drought. And I'm concerned about all of this because it's very rarely dry. But thank you for listening.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Anyone else here like to ask, sir? Go ahead.
Charles McCarthy, Lakeview Avenue. Pretty much in accordance to the same thing as this, they're blocking off the water there. We're involved with a national flood zone area. And they're building in between it, and I believe they're putting the road in right down in that same area. So if you start filling that in and blocking everything off and building houses up in that area, you're talking about the elevation of water. Now you're gonna be backing that all up into the residents that are all around there, and other residents, and everybody else in behind all that. Again, it's something that needs to be brought up, and you're talking about tidal pools and wet ponds and all that. But you don't have any roads figured out where they're going in exactly yet. You don't know exactly what's going on with the septic yet. So I'm just jumping the gun here as far as trying to itemize certain footage on riverfronts and stuff like that, if it's not even approved with the planning board. Shouldn't the planning board have their approval? And speaking of the planning board, this is under a special permit, and I understand a special permit is supposed to benefit the town of Bellingham. So if this project is giving problems with flood zones, traffic, and other things, how is this going to benefit the town of Bellingham? I guess that's a planning board question.
Yes, it is. So the planning board does not make decisions by themselves when it's under the purview of other boards. In this case, the Conservation Commission has certain areas, and we've been dealing with this for a while on this project, where it's wetlands related bylaws are town wetlands bylaws or state bylaws, DEP bylaws, Wetlands Protection Act, as the lady there mentioned too. So we move forward in conjunction with each other. We keep coordinating with each other. Hannah and Rob talk to each other all the time about where we are with this issue, with that issue, because some of the issues overlap. If they put a road into a wetlands area, obviously it's gonna impact the wetlands. But the road is a planning board issue. We don't deal with the road per se. We deal with the impact of the wetlands, but they're tied into the road. So if they move the road again, then that changes things, so forth. So we have to work together with them. If the planning board made all the decisions and laid it out, and they got a perfect plan in their view, and the Conservation Commission wasn't consulted at all, and now we have to deal with a set plan for roads and so forth, but we say this road can't go through here, it's a protected area, then suddenly the planning board is thrown in. So that's why they work together, and we don't let planning board do this thing. Some projects are just planning board, there's no wetlands involved, no resource areas involved, the Conservation Commission has nothing to say about it, so we don't get involved in it, we don't participate in hearings and meetings about it or anything else. We're available if needed, but in this case, this project is a combination of planning board and Conservation Commission and other departments in the town, fire, police and so forth have been involved in as part of both planning board and other safety issues that the applicant needs to go through. I know there's a lot of stuff involved in that, and any one of those issues could become a big enough issue that it would affect how the applicant has to change their plans. Say the fire department says the road has to be 3 feet wider throughout the whole site. Suddenly that impacts both planning board and the Conservation Commission potentially. So things are changing and evolving throughout the whole course of the project. Until it's done and approved by all the boards, it's sort of not done. Things
Mr.
can
Chair,
change.
can I add to your point, sir, about the flowing of information in my phraseology? About 2 meetings ago, we did instruct the client to go back, put some finality to your design, stop presenting what if situations, because we were sitting here as a board not knowing what the project was. So we sent them back and said, look, finish it, give us one submission and what you propose, we'll evaluate that. I don't know if the drawings we got in are it. We do this week.
Yeah.
You say full set on them.
Yeah.
So.
The landscape.
So I hear your point, and 2 meetings ago, we instructed the applicant to finalize something and present it to us. Because we were confused.
Because that helps us look at the impacts as like a performance standard requirement. So a lot of the regulations are numeric. So if you're like over 5,000 square feet, you gotta do blah, blah, blah. If you're over 10,000 square feet, you gotta do blah, blah, blah. So then we can see that and say, okay, so these are the things they're gonna have to meet, so they meet. And then if this project doesn't work out and they have to do something else, okay, let's see the numbers again. All right, here's what you gotta meet this time. So it's like continuous process.
We usually tell people, or I tell people that when the Conservation Commission decides things, it's based on 2 things primarily, and that's our mandate, and that is the science. Wetlands reports, delineation of where wetlands are, wildlife habitat, issues, things like that, the science of things. Which we get consultants to help us with because none of us are scientists, wetland scientists. So that's why we have consultants. So you're here, BSC is one of the companies that we've used to help review that experts. But the other hand, some people are more scientific. The other is the law. And that's the regulations, whether it's the wetlands bylaws that the town has, the state bylaws, federal, if they're rarely, but federal guidelines. All those, if they applicant can come up with a project that satisfies the legal and satisfies the science, they're not doing things that are bad environmentally enough to cause us to have to regulate or change something, then a project is generally approved. It might have to be modified and changed along the way, but it might be approved. If they can't meet it, or they won't, or are unable to meet it, because they're not willing to change the project to meet one of those things, either legal or the bylaws and so forth, or the science, and change things so that they replicate an area that needs to be, or something like that scientifically, then a project would have grounds for being rejected. And occasionally that does happen in this town with Conservation Commission, not often, but usually after a long process like this, sometimes years, an applicant and the commission are able to work out, and the planning board has the same issues on their side, with applicants to work out something that is agreeable enough, the town meets those, in our case, lines and the law, and then it's approved. But there's a lot of back and forth in between them. Which is great to have the public and people like yourselves, who are neighbors and butters, to say things like, what if it's gonna back up and impact my area? You have the right to ask that. You wanna know that before the project's approved. Those are the points to bring up, and we need to make sure that we have asked the applicant to prove that, if they weren't already required to by law, bylaws, or the science, to prove that they're not negatively impacting, your property as an abutter potentially. So
And
That's
the other
what-
question is, excuse me, is with the septic system proposal being pumped uphill, going over to the place across.
Just to
same-
be clear, you're saying septic, but you mean sewage, yes,
the
as opposed to
sewage-
septic system.
Yes, the sewage system
Okay.
being pumped uphill. Any possibilities that could have like a precaution in case when that fails, it doesn't just all leak and infect the wetlands and infect all the aquifers? Is there like a conservation committee scenario, or would that come up with the planning board, or a little bit of both? To take the extra precaution for when it does fail, like it did already on the other side of Bellingham on that pump that they wanna pump it to, on the other side of Silver Lake?
I think you're referring to the Dupree pump station.
Yeah.
So,
That had a failure, that had a failure last year and that leaked in the Peach River. There is no basin or anything around that to catch that. So it would be nice automatically to put a big basin there. So if that fails again, to catch all that bad water, so it doesn't pollute Peach River. And then pumping up the stuff from the pumping station that they plan to put in, to go to that, put it in a couple basins just when it does fail, because it will when lightning hits it, or when there's a major flood, so on and so forth. But just to take that extra precaution, so we don't have a disaster on our hands? Anything like, any way of going about that to try to help with that, or? I know it's a lot thing, but it would be nice on the builder to say, yeah, I'm putting an extra white basin just because it's the right thing to do.
So the answer is definitely yes, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds with the planning side of things, but if you recall from previous meetings, there was quite a bit of contention between the connection from this development to Dupree Pump Station, because we have witnessed quite a few, not witnessed, we've experienced quite a few issues with that station. In response to those issues, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was installed in 2018, and the town, after the previous, or the developer who installed that, did quite a bit of work to get it in compliance with the town at the time, their specs. The town accepted that. We are seeing more issues, and in response to those issues, the town actually created new specifications with different kinds of pumps. So it's a complete, now the town would not accept that pump station. There's a whole new spec for the submerged pumps. With the on-site system and the Dupree pump system, they're all connected to our emergency SCADA system. So when that ended up failing, the DPW was alerted, and it could have been a really bad failure. Fortunately, they were able to get out there and start bypassing. Obviously, it took a little bit of time to shut it down. There are also emergency protocol in place, and with the new specifications, they're even better than what the current Dupree pump station has. And if I'm not mistaken, I think one of the reasons for that issue that you're mentioning, I think the backup system is what failed in that instance, which obviously is an issue. So with that, the specifications, they would have to be met. I don't want to get too far into the Dupree pump station connection. Maybe we can discuss it at the next planning board meeting, because that is an open issue to date. Hopefully that answers.
So,
the
yeah,
question.
I'm just trying to make it aware to where it would be nice to make sure we have an extra backup, make sure we have extra precautions with
Yeah.
all of this that is going to happen if it does happen.
And any pump station that is installed would have backup alarms and the bypass structure. DPW would never allow it any other way. And the Dupree pump station is a serious situation, and fortunately now the town has adopted new regulations to make sure that that doesn't happen in the future.
Another issue in itself.
Yes.
Thank you, Ron.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna move this along. Sir?
Sorry, I'll be brief. Agni Barushi, 525 Lake Street. There was a lot of discussion about, potentially waiving or omitting certain assessments or providing waivers to certain requirements. I think you've all agreed that you won't be doing that, but I think just for the benefit of the town and this process, I think where it's not sort of unduly onerous to the applicant, I think erring on the side of requesting as much information as possible is the right course of action. So I just wanted to make that note.
Okay, thank you for that. Sure. Anyone else, sir? Okay, thank you for your patience, both people in the room who've been waiting for other things or wanting to hear about other things that are coming up. I think I see a few faces who will not be thrilled to hear that next item on the agenda might be. But first, we are going to, well, I'm just a motion to close and continue this to the next meeting.
I don't think you want to close it.
I'm sorry, not close. I
Just-
continue.
just
Sorry, thank
continue.
you. I knew it started with a B, sorry. Speaking without thinking, thank you. So I'll accept a motion from someone here on the board.
Second.
Okay, James and, okay, tie, so Steve, I'll say. It's on the 25th, correct? Yes, till the 25th at 7 p.m. Any discussion? Hearing none, saying none. Pam,
Aye.
Harry on.
Hi.
Don?
Aye.
Steve? All right, James?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you,
Paul.
Paul. Thank you,
Appreciate your
Paul.
time
Thank
tonight.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Paul.
25th. 25th, thank you. Okay, we will be, now bringing up briefly, very briefly, the continued hearing for notice of intent for Blackstone Street. Alteration of bordering vegetated wetland, BBW and associated 100-foot buffer zone for improvements to the undeveloped section of Blackstone Street, including infrastructure, utilities, and site grading. Those proposals, the applicant, representative not, listed. When did we get this request for the public?
It was on Friday, and I put it on the agenda, so.
Right. So it's showing public agenda. Okay, so as you may have seen, if you're here for that Blackstone Street project, it has been requested, it was shown on the agenda, Hannah's telling me online, that it be continued to June 25th at the applicant's request. They're waiting for some more information to come in, I guess, and so because of that, the applicants requested that. And it's not in the room, we cannot discuss that project, so we won't entertain questions or anything about it, just to tell you that it will be continued to, if the commission agrees and votes to do so, to the evening of June 25th. So I will accept the motion. Thank you, Ariane.
Seconded.
Second by Don. Thank you. Any discussion about this? No? Okay, Pam,
Aye.
James.
Aye.
Steve. All right, you on?
Aye.
Ariane?
Hi.
Mike, aye. All right, so now, so we continue to the evening of June 25th to 7 p.m. So if you're here in Blackstone Street, sorry for the long wait and short update, but that's where we're at that.
Can, we list this first next time.
That one? Yeah, sure. I think that's, I can.
So if it gets
Mind
continued,
yeah, something like that.
If you maybe have, questions.
It's on.
Can we?
Well, if it is, any.
If you're asking a general question about that procedure, that's about it, yeah. We can talk about ways to make that one, if there's 90 million plans coming in.
Can I ask Hannah quick on the agenda, it just, does it, the one that the folks in the public see, it just says see hearing?
It says continued to June.
So it's actually written out?
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
a ONT to June.
Okay, I just wanted to, because the one we have just says see.
No, that's the bottom one, that's.
Oh, like I put that in, under the seven PM
Oh.
section rather than, yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, we will move to the last item officially on the agenda of another business, and that is the continued hearing for notice of intent for 123 London Street, commercial redevelopment within Riverfront and 100-foot buffer zone to BBW. Come on up, so. BC Pavone Enterprises is the applicant, and Bill Allison from Land Fund is the census.
Back finally.
Yeah. So. As briefly as you can and will, can you tell us what has changed since we last? This is somewhere between here and Foxborough, I believe. Well, it's like, anything about it, no, I do remember walking the site, the cold day, the sun was there, I think. Yeah.
Sun shivering.
He eventually gave him some clothing, which was good.
These are bulking, so.
It's probably another foot taller since.
Yes. Okay, so, Bill, go ahead. Yeah, Mike, Bill House Land Plan, Steve Alsos Land Plan, and Mark Pavoni, the client. Steve's our project engineer, so he'll walk us through, the stuff as we can. Sure, he knows him a lot, so bear with me. Sure. If anybody's here for Blacks, for this particular project, wants to move over to a site seat, sorry, no, where they can see better, that's fine. If not, no, you might be fine with the board where it is. If nobody's here, they don't care, that's fine. Okay. Just want to make sure I offer, you don't have to sit off to the side. Okay, go ahead, please.
Again, Stephen Ballswitch, Land Planning. So the principal changes that pertain to the conservation really pertain to the Mass DEP comments that were outstanding. One of them was that we showed snow storage. We showed that on the landscaping plan around the perimeter. A lot of the alterations regarding this board are on sheet C4 landscaping.
Excuse me, there's two drawing sets in the folder.
In the folder I gave you,
Yes.
yep, the ones at the top are the new ones and the ones at the bottom are the old ones, just so you can have a refresher for just.
Actually, you said that.
So the one labeled stamped.
Yeah. Another indicator is on this set, I also added the DEP file number. Because they acknowledged we had a complete submission, so you can see that DEP number, I put that on there.
So C4?
Yes. Back to the alteration on this sheet is basically the snow storage. We are proposing, which is more planning board, Cape Cod berm around the perimeter of the facility. And we've indicated four areas of snow storage. Basically on the back side of the wall here, over the curve between the facade of the building and Mendon Street, and then along the entryways. The other change regarding DEP was basically planting and restoration. As you're all aware, this is a highly degraded site. I believe it was used principally for storage and gravel area. We're providing also per the planning board planting requirement, 6 total trees indicated here. And then 2 internal to the parking lot as identified here. We also are required for the planning board to have sideline plantings, which we have provided, we're proposing giant green arborvitaes. Additionally, we're providing any degraded area within this portion of the restaurant be removed and reseeded with a wetland conservation mix. In addition to 6 high bush blueberry. BC. Another comment had to do with stormwater management. So as you're aware, we're currently before the planning board, and CMG has provided a review of the project as is, and they agreed at that time that standard 3 and 4 were in compliant. The other comment was regarding the O&M plan. Again, per the planning board requirements, procedural rules, the O&M plan is required to be in perpetuity. So we're currently, putting that before the board, planning board for approval. So DEP's comment regarding perpetual maintenance agreement is gonna be hopefully approved by the planning board tomorrow. We'll see. The big comment was comment number one. They needed some DEP, that is, needed some clarification on our degraded area calculations. So the altered degraded area within the 100 foot of the riverbank is 478 square feet, and the altered non-degraded area in that 0 to 100 feet is 1,200. So in all, 0 to 100, we're altering 1,200 square feet non-degraded. Within the 100 and 200, we are altering 3,600 square feet of non-degraded area. So in total, we're under 5,000 square feet of alteration within the riverfront area. The total riverfront area, I believe, is noted on the plan.
Can you define between degraded, as far as DEP is concerned, versus non-degraded areas? What does that mean on the site? Paved areas, unpaved areas, areas that were full of junk but not and overgrown?
In this case, it's all just crushed gravel, asphalt, basically, any like material not natural that has become compact over time.
Because the impervious went like down by 75% or something like that on the site, if I remember right, impervious previous and current, proposed or whatever. Which I assume is removing a lot of the area that was crushed gravel and so forth, and putting in some of the plantings and or the seed mix in that one area in the top corner of the between the 100 and the 200. That I didn't know if that was also across the overall site too, as well, reducing the impervious. And was that also affecting, what is the true grid system exactly? Because that was a big component that was added in.
Yeah, so on sheet C5, I kind of give an overview of kind of the watershed analysis for stormwater, but you kind of see how much was degraded area, the gray, impervious versus what we're proposing. In regards to the true grid system, that was to accommodate the fire department. They wanted 3 side access, 4 side access as best as we could provide. So it's the GeoGrid map. That's H20 loading, so it is permeable.
So the aerial turn on C6, is that for fire truck or your vehicles?
That is actually for the fire apparatus truck.
Okay.
So that is the town provided spec for that.
I was just driving up.
Not on this one. So, well, actually, I was gonna ask, is that correct? I'm thinking of something that I've seen, when it was close, I just saw it, in an area that was driven on, parked on, it was part of a parking area, I think, but it was basically, looks like a plastic grid, and grass is growing up through it. Is the grass and so forth going to go through this and just maintained by weed whacking or whatever across the top of it, or is it something like gravel, which is permeable, loose gravel underneath that, and this is just sitting on top, that,
Believe I have a spec for this.
It's so much more exciting to see. It's a nicer picture for all. That's what you brought all the stuff. I want to make sure you have a chance to use that.
I believe it's proposed grass.
Yeah, I believe it is too. I just wanted to make sure before I misstated this. So it'll be clean washed aggregate. I believe there's 2 specs. One, they call it true grid, but there's like gravel paved versus grass paved. The grass is the one you're talking about where the grass grows up through it. This will be just angular stone, basically. C11.
Gotcha. Yeah, same looking out there. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay. And well, as the commission members, I did, first off, I interrupted you, so I'm sorry. If you have, did you cover all the DEP points?
Yeah, that was both the DEP.
Okay, and all those changes are. What bill has changed substantially, or substantially for us? Anything that we needed to? By the scope has changed, all the planning board original plan? From what we approved, basically, we were done with the process. I think so long ago, because for one thing, you're well outside of most of the area that's impacted. You got the gas line easement that's between you as buffer and the resource area, that's the stream that we walked. So, it seemed like there was very little, and anything that you were doing seemed to be pulling things back. The retaining wall, that we saw that is being kept, I think you had said there was on the right-hand side of the site, near the degraded area that's being restored. That snow area storage that you showed in the beginning, on that side of the building, does that go right up to the wall? In other words, the snow could be piled up on that side of the building in that area, I think, and then potentially there's nothing between that and the wall. Outside of it, maybe I wasn't getting a good look at that. Yeah, I think it was what page 7. C4.
C4.
Yeah. So the right side of the building / area you could drive around, not drive around, sorry. Snow storage area to the right there.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't fully, they're not gonna be pushing it towards the top. There is a space there.
Okay.
As you know, we're not getting the snows that we used to.
Don't
but
fix things, okay.
There's a significant amount of space over there. There is, as on this plan, a buffer between the walls. So the hatch dot is what I have.
What is the solid white line, I mean, in the area that's clear, right there where the, Hannah's mouse is on the culture, just easier. So what does this line represent?
Oh, yeah, that's the limits of the parking.
Okay, so all this is paved, okay,
Yes.
got you there, so you're saying the snow storage is going here, this is the retaining wall, though, correct?
Yes.
So what's to stop snow from being piled here? You're saying there's just a gap here? There's no guardrail or anything being posted on top of this to keep the plow driver from just pushing a little too far in the middle of the snowstorm and over the side?
So we do hope they'll stop at the berm.
Well, so that's what I was gonna say. You talked about a berm around it too, but I'm trying to picture how a berm relates to. If it's a Cape Cod berm, paved wise around my neighborhood is a low thing you can drive right a mile right over. So that's not gonna stop anybody. We usually along resource areas where there's, especially there's a drop off or a wall and then a resource area and they're proposing snow storage, we like to see a guardrail, a fence, something to give a plow driver a physical limitation, clear as day, when they're plowing, because they're plowing, they're in a hurry. One contractor might be as good as another.
Right.
Somebody else operates the site after you're off of it. You know, we try to make it tough for them to push stuff that might have contaminants in it into a resource area inadvertently, because they never would do it on purpose. Anyway, so
Sheet C2, the height of the wall also requires a guard. So on sheet C2, we have our layout plan,
okay.
and that shows with a note, guard on the top of the wall.
So there will be.
And that's.
Oh, so there is.
But
Yeah, there is.
You know, that kind of guard.
Yeah.
When you say P card, is that posted?
P,
Because it
in
looks
the
like
context
posted.
is proposed,
Proposed,
so.
okay. Can we go back to C11 for a minute? This is a question for my own education. And the True Grid. It's saying 40% void, so does that become a holding box for water?
Yeah, so in our stormwater report that was recently amended, and it actually hasn't changed since the beginning, because we're providing sufficient storage volume, we were able to claim a curve number on this. So it will hold water in that stone and recharge. That was also one of the reasons we went with the True Grid, because we were able to reduce the impervious in the degraded area, but still provide an area for the fire truck and provide loading. So, yes.
Yeah. The assembly of that. While it seems simple conceptually that it's just gravel, it's a bit complex. Because you're talking about aggregate specific sizes to get a 40% void, topped with something finer to hold the loading. Is that something you're going to monitor in the process? Who assembles that and how does that get checked?
Believe that would be just normal inspections. I don't know if Robert, through the chair, could comment on that.
Yeah, I think for the True Grids, I'm pretty certain that they've been proposed throughout the town previously. So it would really rely on inspectional services. There's a couple aspects of this project that are gonna require a little bit, different inspections. One of them is the retaining wall, because it's actually has to be designed by a structural engineer, which requires a different kind of inspection. This is another one where, I imagine what inspectional services will require from the installer is just some type of geotech report, just to document compliance. And it's pretty simple. They can do that through like a density test and such.
Engineering stamp on the plan or something eventually.
Exactly. So, especially for the retaining wall, I don't know if they necessarily need an engineer.
So you're adding more retaining wall, or is it what we saw there on the site? Because there was, I don't remember how many feet of retaining wall, there was some there. We walked up around that side of it. And
I think that was just the riprap, that wasn't the retaining.
yeah, there wasn't a.
No, that's what I was confused, said that.
Right by where the building was, okay, that had all the stuff in it, so well, I thought that, again.
No wall, yeah.
Seemed like, okay, all
All
right,
new wall.
so there will be a wall in that area though, right along that, where the riprap was, okay, good.
We marked up, it's.
Riprap of retaining wall, I knew it was going up and then looking back down at the wetlands area, okay. Oh, okay, good, that's good.
Company and something too, when we compact roads for the Mass DOT, so density tests, we've gone through them before to get the. No, to go to the lab and they would test it for us, like they do it on the state roads after we put final pave, so our companies that we can use to check that.
Must be anxious to get going.
Hopefully soon. Any other question, commission members? Again, the scope is not just,
Just and fairly straightforward.
and if anything, they've reduced things and made things smaller, more compact, and more, from our point of view, further away from resource area, and I don't see anything negative on, or. But, Pam, do you have anything?
No, I don't have any
Okay.
thoughts. Seems pretty
Okay.
straightforward.
Okay. All right, I will. Well, thank you. Why don't you elucidate that for the record though, because somebody else transcribed that. Okay, come on.
Motion to close and issue.
Which will basically have just the standard ones on. Good here, what's that? You want?
Ripping the bees nest over here.
I have one, like, I'll second, so we can get to discussion.
Okay.
One question.
Thank you.
And keep in mind, we don't have planning board approval yet.
Pending planning board, please.
Pending, or do you want to just continue? Yeah.
Typically, we just continue until we get planning board. Good idea. Everyone's on the same page.
I rescind my second.
I make a motion to continue to June 20th.
Second.
All right, and for discussion, what we have occasionally, I believe, and Hannah, you can correct me if you've not done it in your time, but I know, I think in previous administrators it does. We can make motion to, or allow the administrator, an agent in this case, to draw up the order of conditions, not having to sign it or anything, and have it ready for the next meeting so that it could be signed if that is. Well, she can do it whenever, yeah, I don't know that she's ever been told, would you have assumed that it's fine to go ahead and do the order of conditions if we continue to the next meeting, or you just?
Sometimes
gives you the
further if
flexibility.
I start something and then if things get added or taken away.
Right,
depending
certainly,
on how much time.
You know, not set in stone or anything, but it gives you the latitude to go ahead and get started on that. And also gives the applicant the knowledge, if we say it during the meeting, as part of the approval process, that things can rapidly, after the next meeting, move forward. That's not, if you're looking at doing this next year or something, that wouldn't matter to you, but if some applicants are, looking for that timetable, like how fast after we, what's next? So, I don't know that needs an amendment to your motion per se. You just go ahead and do it. Alright. That's fine. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other
I
discussion?
have one thing for discussion.
Go ahead.
One question. I might be misremembering, but I don't think Pam was on the board when we originally discussed.
Sure wasn't. Good question.
Are we sure? I vaguely remember this.
Vaguely, well, that's because it happened so long ago.
Oh, it's because
I'm kind of vague on it. Obviously, I don't remember the thing.
well, I didn't know much yet, but I kind of remember some
Right
details,
when
but
I
I think
started, so I don't remember if it was.
We'll ask Bill, because Bill was the one who came to us as the representative the first time. How long ago did you start with the Concom?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I would note that this was open December 11th.
Who was president of the United States?
I think you're correct.
Let's go back to that.
The plans were dated.
Because we had this meeting before we had planning board.
November 12th. What
We
was it?
still have a forum anyways, right?
Oh,
She
right.
just wouldn't be able to.
Right, so the question.
Yeah,
was-
no, that's more the question of recording the vote.
Right,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
That was it.
Pam, when did you start officially? When we started?
November. I can't remember if it was the first one or the second one.
That was
November.
my first
So
meeting.
maybe this was her first meeting.
Yeah, that, I'm thinking.
So that was probably,
We can take the vote. We're gonna be able
Look into it.
to vote anyway.
Just whether.
This is
Well,
more.
we're voting to continue it
This
anyways.
is,
With a couple things.
this is more important with the order anyway,
Right.
not to continue.
Should I just abstain from
Yeah, I have
voting?
a note that we opened December 11th and moved it to January 22nd.
Okay.
she was here.
Good news.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's all.
so you were apparently here, so you could vote, Pam.
Good.
You just had like.
All we're doing is continue, so we're voting to continue, I think,
Yep.
Yeah, we're
Continued.
going to June 25th, second.
We've already seconded.
all right, I just want to make sure the motion was clear, it wasn't to close it or anything like that. Okay. Ariane,
Aye.
Pam,
Aye.
Don,
Aye.
Steve, all right, James, aye, Mike, aye, okay. Thank you, so continue to the evening of June 25th.
What are we gonna do when this is eventually over? Because we're so used to seeing it on the agenda, I'm not gonna recognize an agenda.
Get the peer review back.
Hannah.
Yeah,
Months ago.
So you're wanting to use this for equipment storage primarily.
No,
I was at least.
so it's gonna have a lot.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
I have another office in Williams Way, that's right. All the equipment.
Are you here for money, ma'am? Are you here for money? No, okay.
Drive.
Okay, well, okay, Bunny Drive, anybody have interest in that? Come on up to the front here, you can hear. Okay. What? Found this thing. Yeah. Welcome. Record, can you just identify yourselves, please?
Excuse me?
Could you identify yourselves for the record, please?
Bruno Blanchard, 12 Mooney Drive.
Stacy Chomani.
Oh, Morning Drive, I'll be special. Okay, thank you. Okay, we had an enforcement order.
Yes, so I'm pulling that up right now. Sorry, that wasn't,
That's fine, take that.
well, wasn't in.
We tried filling out the note of intent last night, Stacy and I. We have no idea what we're doing.
That's,
Ignorance on our behalf.
that's
I
ignorance.
apologize.
You're a happy for person, as they say, ignorance is bliss. I like to think I'm pretty happy. Yeah, I know about that. Okay, so yeah, the forms can be a little daunting at times, especially if you never had to do one before. There's a lot of lines and a lot of checks and circles. So, just in general, for your knowledge, Hannah is available as a resource to help you work through that process. You know, you take a stab at it yourself and you're like stymied. We don't want somebody to get totally frustrated and not do it or decide that they just throw their hands up. So don't get to that point. You can give the office a call or send her an
That's
email.
over here.
So, yeah, so, okay, go ahead, Hannah.
Yeah, so that was just, the deadline was for today for the enforcement order, so if they need more time, if you guys are amenable to that, we would just have to issue a new enforcement order with some new deadlines. So that they could meet those deadlines.
That's fine. You like doing paperwork, don't you?
You just have to cross it off.
And then mail it all. Yeah, and everything has to go by certified mail or case. Note all of that.
So while you're filling out the paperwork and we're discussing the idea of extending or just providing extension via a new enforcement order, are you making any progress on this? Are you moving things?
Yes, I did remove the compost pile out of the back, those in the wetlands. What else did we do back there? I relocated the spot I was supposed to move the chicken coop,
Okay,
and Hannah was supposed to come out and take a look at it.
Do you just decide not to wing it yourself?
It's the way, well, I wanna do it the way I'm supposed to do it.
We don't wanna do it.
Bad joke, bad joke, bad
I'm gonna use my non-joking move today.
It's late at night, sorry, after 9 o'clock, you can't make bad jokes, so I realize that, okay, sorry. Okay, couldn't resist, all right. I thought I should chicken out, that one. I know. Anything else in there on the?
So I guess
form?
it would just be like as, that was actually, we actually ended up amending it to give them a little bit more time from the one that was in there.
Okay,
But, so I'm not sure what date you guys would like to just have that amended to and.
That's to have
Base-
it for complete.
No, just
Oh.
to fill out the NOI and have a restoration plan for the plantings, because there were some trees that were cut, so.
why don't we ask the three of you to give us a consensus on when you think that could be reasonably done, both filling out the form and coming up with the restoration plan, because. I mean, you obviously want to make progress on this, you're here tonight, it's on good faith, you want to get the form done. And we're not sharing resistance, so I think the board is looking forward to work with you on this and make sure it moves forward. What do you think, Hannah?
I mean, maybe another month just to get everything
Yeah.
kind of put together.
Even.
I would,
Well, I know you're a joke.
no, I would give us some buffer.
Okay.
Right, yeah,
Okay,
just.
yeah, so
It wasn't a joke.
just like, I guess just date wise, I'm trying to figure out what date that would be from now, just to make sure it's not like a weekend or something,
Oh,
because that happened last time too. And then
I
somebody
heard you
came
know
up
that
with
and
the
do
date.
that too, because she's that.
That's my
okay.
character.
Okay, aware of the date. All right, so we'll look down the road and come up with a date that's about 6 weeks out, you think?
6 weeks from today would be the 23rd of July. Or maybe we can make it to like the 18th or.
Yeah, 'cause I don't
or
think,
even make it be like a Friday and then like. And you'd have a few days.
Yeah, well, because we just have to have it like 2 weeks before the next hearing date for the NOIs. That's why it's kind of.
The 9th and 23rd is when we're meeting in July, correct?
Yep. Yeah. So I would say,
May I interject while you're doing that? There was some debris behind the shed. Has
Yes.
that been moved?
Yes, I removed the debris behind the shed. That debris came from a tree that fell down in the wetland, a dead tree that fell over. We cut the tree, I was in the hospital at the time, my buddies cut the tree up for me and left it there in the wetlands. We didn't bring a tree from across the street for the wetlands, like that. That's where it came from.
I
It
think
rotted, it was
Very few
rotted.
people go to that effort.
Well, I'm in the wood business. It rotted and fell over. That was where the problem started. The rotted tree fell over in the shed. And that's what-
So you got a date there? Don't-
so maybe have it by the 23rd and then it'll just be the first meeting in August.
all right, yeah.
Fine.
Does that work for you?
23rd.
Well,
So we're gonna have all that stuff be due on July 23rd, so we can kind of have a conversation and.
once again, we need to sit down and fill out the NO,
Yep,
you and I. or
yeah,
three of us,
exactly,
okay.
yeah, and if you give me a
Sure,
call, we'll
with
set
you,
up
with me.
a time to meet in the office and we can go over. it.
Yep.
And then the restoration plan, Hannah could maybe suggest some people that you could talk to, come up with something, and she'd give you an idea of what kind of restoration plan, what a restoration plan might involve, we don't want you doing more than you need to do, but we don't want you coming here and saying, I'm gonna take Campbell Grassy and throw it. back
No,
to the
I understand. I wanna do a neat-
Somewhere in between there, and she'll give you the advice to get you in the right direction, so you can focus your efforts, but I think probably in about 6 weeks, we're talking about having that all done by, and then we'll have a meeting in August and have reviewed the information by then, and, hopefully it's thumbs up here, everything's good, and we're moving forward there, but, so extending we were looking for motion to.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Now, Hannah cannot tell them what to do. She can only make recommendations about how it's done in the past, correct?
What, in general terms, the commission is looking for restoration types of plans, and or a person or company that could provide those services for them, as Hannah could provide, so you don't have to go through the Zoom or, I have not Zoom,
In other words, so she can't
website.
engineer it and lay it out for you and say, okay, here it is.
Right.
You've got to come up with it. She'll steer you.
So it might be like something maybe a consultant would be using.
It's really just a planting plan, right?
My boss and others, is that what we're looking for?
And the shed, just doing like a plan with the shed, but
Yeah, just work with Hannah and she'll give you some guidance and then you take that and put together
I
your
mean,
plan.
we've approved this small enough type of
Right.
stuff with just a hand-drawn sketch, so something as simple as that is probably sufficient for me.
But you probably have some examples you can show them.
yeah, we can kind of, I mean, and there's like ways you can kind
Yeah.
of mark up the aerials on the town GIS and that kind of stuff, so.
And just had, past conversations with other meetings. And so we're good.
Okay. All right, well, I don't took the motion to issue, the other one just expired, we don't have to do anything about the other one, right?
Oh, yeah, just to issue a new
Right,
date.
right,
just
right.
Vote to issue a new date and then I'll write it up.
On the existing enforcement order?
Yeah, and I'll amend it.
Do those actually have numbers associated with them, like enforcement number of 1, 2, 3?
Only if there's,
DEP. Gotcha, okay, that's all.
Make a motion to amend the existing enforcement order with the new date of July 23rd,
For 12 on each drive.
12 Unique Drive,
Okay.
July 23rd, at which point the NOI be complete. And then we will have a hearing, or we will reschedule this under other business for the following meeting.
well, it would be an
So
NOI,
it'd be-
so.
be an actual-
It'd be on the
Okay.
agenda.
Well, we anticipate it will be on the agenda.
You wanna
That's
mention the
all.
planting plan as a separate thing, or is that going to be included within the NOI?
Also,
The planting plan would just be as part of the restoration plan, so that.
Oh,
would
the
get
restoration
closed
plan
out.
slash-
That would get closed out.
The restoration plan is essentially a planting plan with a shed drawn on it.
Right, but is that included within the NOI
Yes.
paperwork, or is it separate? Okay, just wanna make sure if it need to be listed separately, we do so at this time. Okay, good, so that's included in the NOI, which we would receive on the 23rd, or
Yeah,
Hannah would
receive it
receive, and it would be on the agenda for the August
And I'll second that.
13th meeting? 13th and 27th of August, right?
Yep.
Okay, we have motion, a second from Don, any discussion additionally?
I think I have one final question. I missed what the fate of the chicken coop was.
That,
I'm in such a foul mood, I can't describe it.
that I guess is something that I would have said you guys have a little bit more leeway there. With like, oh, did you just want it out of the 25 or out of the 50, because we have the no structure 50 zone setback, but it's also like a single family home, so you guys have a little bit more leeway there. But I was talking to the Board of Health Regulations and those setbacks are now 50 feet. So I do have to talk to them to see like.
Is there a
if
place on
that's
the property
important.
that we can sit?
Exactly, like if there's some relief for that, like where Board of Health would require that to be before we go forward and approve.
So to move it out of the wetland moves it within the setback of the house. What setback are you talking about?
From the move 25 feet from the wetland or 50 feet from the wetland, and they now have that in their regulations.
Or a health setback into the
It's-
wetland.
Yeah, they have that in their regulations now.
They
They're,
just
they're,
specifically say
they're
wetland?
new, yeah,
Resource area?
yep, those are the
That's what got
regulations
approved
that
at
were
the town meeting.
promulgated through the last town meeting was what the livestock regulations.
Oh, the livestock.
But
one,
I
okay.
didn't know that included
And
a
it's
50 foot.
feet
Yeah,
setback.
why don't we catch that?
I
mean,
Sugar
doesn't
and
say that.
smokers, come on.
It could be, but this might be above my pay grade, but I don't think that's legal. Yeah.
All right, well, I think,
Ask them.
I think
But that's
Hannah
also
will check
our
before
code.
they site locate this with a sketch. Find someplace on your lot that you can
And it's
hopefully have.
ultimately up to you guys to approve or.
Right.
Yeah, next
If you'd like,
meeting.
so.
we'll worry about
Yeah.
that.
We have plenty of time to get all the info.
So there's no other discussion because Ariane was in here all night. I'm just kidding. We will take a vote. Ariane.
Okay.
Pam.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
Steve.
Yeah,
James.
Aye.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mike, aye. All right, so that's unanimous vote. So we will issue new, well, we just added some time on the enforcement order.
Extended it.
You're gonna work with Hannah. We're good to go. And you'll get it squared away.
I appreciate that.
Appreciate you coming in tonight. Thank you and hanging.
Yeah,
hanging,
so
sitting through it all meeting just to get to
Give
this
you a
point.
call,
Thank you.
we'll get that squared away, whatever, figure out a time.
Very good. Great.
Thank
Hang
you.
in there.
Okay, y'all.
Have a rainy weekend coming up. Hang in there.
Okay. You joking?
No, thank you.
No.
Raining.
Huh?
It's raining.
Hopefully Sundays, that's on Sunday.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Thanks for hanging in there tonight.
Oh, it's a long meeting.
Yes.
I heard it up to you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Resident concern.
Yep.
yes.
So
Jinx.
this was,
Yeah.
for Jenks Reservoir. This is just kind of like a background thing that came up that I knew we were gonna need a new NOI because the old one has been kind of continued many a time. and
Oh,
it's been a long
2006.
time. Now it was only extended because of the,
2006.
I looked it back and I remember the agent at the time. Yeah, he was a great guy. It started out and he retired a couple years after, but yeah, and like his name.
So what is this?
Yeah.
What's the?
It's treatments of both Jenks Reservoir and Silver Lake.
Yeah.
Have been done for years by a management company, which
Yeah.
applies chemicals. We approved it, basically just approving it every year. Dennis Frayne, I think, actually signs off on behalf of the town, but as was in the information, but as it apparently eventually has to be redone.
So this
Yeah,
is a
so
town.
it's gonna-
this
it's
is
gonna-
Town filing to us.
yes, essentially, yep, but part of the issue is, the interested resident lives on the lake and she was talking to me and requesting that, more of the lake be treated because of some of the nuisance aquatic vegetation and like, so a lot of it was the invasives, but there is, a lot of lilies, a lot of that stuff.
Milfoil is a.
Milfoil and lilies were the two big ones. So she was, yes, but also because the commission would have to sign off on
We own.
any of that, because,
Right.
right, so even to submit an NOI, the commission would have to sign off to allow that. So this was just kind of a preliminary thing to be like, is that something, because they were thinking about pursuing it themselves. If
So they
Cal
have
wasn't
more of it
gonna do
treated?
Yeah, basically around their docks and so forth, to make
Yeah.
it easier for their.
Well, because it chokes out everything.
Well,
You drive by it.
so here's the thing, I was reading some of the information, whether it was provided by the original company that did the. Does the treatment or a more current version of it, but in the past, the commission has agreed with the plan and the policy. That while it's good to treat the high traffic areas like around the beach areas and so
Mhm.
forth, and canoe areas, and so forth, that it's recommended that at least 40% of a body of water like this have natural vegetation for the fish life and so forth, so on. So it's not treat the whole lake, get rid of all the weeds. It's do the high traffic areas that in the past has been the accepted policy. In this resident's particular case, she's been treating some of it and dealing with Ann and Matthews in the past before Hannah came on and Hannah before her. And tried to deal with it around their own areas. Now she's proposing as part, knowing that this is going to be coming up as an overall back in 2027, it has to be redone, this town agreement thing, whatever. We can do it before that if we want to, I think. Maybe expanding the scope of it. We'd have to decide, I think, based on some science, whether, we want to continue that, whether it's the current plan, which is just. And procedures is to have the company deal with the high traffic areas and spot treat other areas here and there as needed. Or do a different approach, have a different company come in. And was she the one that provided this other company's proposal for the dollar amounts? and
Yes,
all?
yeah, and it is the company that currently.
Oh, it is the
does
same company? I couldn't
treatment,
remember
yeah,
that.
'cause she worked with him to do some, like they added a little bit of treatment to their edge of the lake, just around the docks, which was in line with the permit with the spot treatment, and they just kind of, that as part of it.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Clarifying, there you go.
Oh,
So.
Clear it up,
Is
clear up
this-
the issue.
That eutrophication of the water, right? Is that coming from algae? Is it all plants? What's the treatment itself?
Now,
Yeah, what's the basic treatment?
Cause or the treatment?
Well, combination of both. What is the treatment targeting? for example, you could have too many plants and then it takes all the oxygen out of the water and no animals.
Which is why they
fish
want to
life.
have certain.
Right, so there's a balance that has to be, and I'm just trying to understand what is it that, what's the intent of it, what's it
I
killing?
think it's both, because that is, I mean, that's the intent right now for what they treat, like they use multiple different methodologies for that, and if algae happens, then they treat the algae. Most of the time
So
it ends up
yeah,
being-
so they're going after both then, it's not just,
Yeah,
yep, okay.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on what their.
See,
thoughts
when
on
they
that
And the
are.
algae's blooming because of all the nitrogen that's leaching into the soil.
It's only from all the septic systems from people.
That's
All the
septic
toxins
system.
around.
Yeah, yeah, okay,
But,
okay.
so that's I guess it's just something that, it would be good to kind of take a look at some of that stuff and start thinking about like whether or not that would
Yeah.
be something.
And that can be extended
You would
Silver
even,
Lake because.
like entertain having an NOI come before.
I
the
mean, if
commission
we're,
to
if we're
change that,
going
basically.
based strictly on the science of it, it never recommends removal of vegetation unless it's an invasive species usually, but then that invasive, you kind of have to manage it cyclically and
Which is what.
replace it with a native species that'll take its place in that chain.
If you can.
But would that also include algae?
No,
Right,
that's a problem.
right, that's why I was
So the
asking about what
milfoil, the two things in that lake that I was reading were milfoil and the lilies, and they're treated differently and there are different issues with them and so forth, but both are considered undesirable if they get out of hand.
Right.
And yet, same time, this company has recommended, and the policy that the Conscom has said in the past is, they agree with is keep, just treat the high traffic areas around the beach and so forth, and don't treat the rest of the area to maintain a level, whether it's invasive or not, and whether it's a problem for the others and so forth around the lake, that live on the lake. That's
It's undesirable for looks and recreation.
Yeah, having seen the area, which I think some members on this commission saw for a different project around Silver Lake that was being discussed, and this was a couple of years ago, so it might not have been. They showed slides, somebody did a presentation, they showed Silver Lake aerial shots over the last like 50 years. And the amount that lake has shrunk down because of growth instrument, so that's one of the reasons to be treated. We may want to, not that we're gonna suddenly expand Silver Lake, even though we own, and,
it's no longer an island, you can.
Yeah, so if you want to consider this is something, because again, between now and 2027, we have to do something between now and then. John, I'll just wait for this to decide to re-up with another company or a different company, or rephrase or reapply, whatever we have to do, Dennis or the town or whatever. But to actually have somebody research what kind of company could give us some recommendations for the long-term best environmental practices for the Silver Lake, Jenks Pond, any other resource or bodies that have this issue.
There's just like actual published articles.
Oh, yeah, and or somebody read those articles and summarize them, whatever, but that we look into it and say, have more calculated, planned, long-term benefit, which would also then be relayable to the people who live around lakes, so they understand what's being going on, why we're doing it, because it's the best practice for whatever. It may be better than what they're seeing now, maybe not, and whatever, but I just don't know enough to know, I understand the issues, and I understand the problems, I just don't know whether we're doing the best things that we can do right now, which might be proven out, or there's some other better.
Well, let's learn more about it, and we have time to do it.
So
We need to revisit
Yeah,
these.
so I gotta work against that,
Right.
I
No, it has a drinking.
Beg
water
pardon?
standard.
Go ahead, Pam,
Oh.
is that you?
I actually got the chance to read a decent amount about this today. I thought it was pretty interesting. Specifically, the resident wanted the Procellacor. It does appear like that is a very targeted herbicide, and the safety profile was decently impressive. My one issue with the idea though was it seemed like it had to be maintained over periods of time, and like treating an entire lake every X number of years is just like way too costly. But to the point that it's healthier for a lake to have like 40% vegetation, it seemed like based on the case studies I was looking at in places in like Vermont where they were doing this, it seems like with this targeted herbicide, they're able to achieve that. So it was pretty interesting, but I don't know if that answers the question of should we do this to the whole lake, knowing that like it would take more effort to upkeep than we would be able to put in.
So I'm gonna say the reason that this herbicide looks so impressive is because it's new. So the only data out there is from the manufacturer. So of course they love it.
Some of the metabolism studies I don't think come from the manufacturer. I got a little bit of time to look into that today.
Well, we have plenty of time, we don't have to do anything about it, it's just bringing it up now, I think is all we want to do.
Yeah.
Tonight, but I think I will encourage between, let's say now and the next meeting or the meeting after that.
Probably not next
See,
meeting.
no, not that we have, it's.
Between now and tomorrow
Not
morning.
that, no, not that we have this on the agenda, you don't have to finish, because I wasn't gonna attack him or work on anybody. No, because I was gonna say, at the next meeting, we'll all be celebrating if Neil shows up, as farewell, as his last meeting. But anyway, those of you that care to look into it, find articles to share with among the commission members as information, you can do so offline, via email, whatever. And look into this as much as you care to, and then maybe at the next meeting or two, we'll bring it up as other business and talk about maybe, do we want to form a subcommittee and, have 2 or 3 members look into this. Get a company or it's consulting advice if we think is needed, get some reading of, from reports, whatever. And maybe even come up with a scope. For one thing, other than Jenks Reservoir and Silver Lake, do we have any other commission-owned bodies of water? There's other things, Box Pond, Lake Hiawatha, whatever, that we have either a strong interest in. Actually, I think Lake Hiawatha is one of the areas we treat too. Maybe not. Maybe all paid by the residents.
Yeah, they have
Okay.
a, lake
Okay,
management.
right. So as a resource area, whether it's owned by the town or owned by the Conservation Commission, if we have a good practice that works for what we come up with, this is the best thing we want to do. It's affordable, well, it's a good plan. We may want to share that with the town and say, these are your own water bodies, or share with a private owners group on Lake Hiawatha, if that's who maintains it. And, share the information, benefit others in the town benefit from it. And then we'll sell it to any other town that wants to know, and get some money. Okay, all right, anything else about this? At this time, okay, good. All right, thanks. So Pam, go ahead and keep reading up and looking up into it, and we'll follow up on it.
I suggest that Pam read up on it, make a presentation.
Oh, PowerPoint, Pam, you're up for it.
If you guys are ready for a very numbers, statistics heavy, I will shoehorn as much in as I
That's
can.
fine. I got it, one of those inflatable neck pillows that looks like I'm awake when I'm not.
Just add a picture every now and again.
Yeah. Okay. You, go ahead, Rob.
What was the name of the herbicide again?
Ursella Core, I believe.
Cellacore, so that's the brand name then. Sounds like a brand name.
I won't ask you to say the generic, it's probably all.
It sounds like we have a resident
It's
volunteer to sit on the committee.
fluorpyroxafen benzyl. Or technically fluorpyroxafen benzyl, 2-pyridine carboxylic acid, 4-amino, 3-chloro-6, 4-chloro-2, fluoro, 3-methoxyphenyl, 5-fluoro-phenyl methyl ester.
Oh, sorry.
You get all that?
That was amazing.
Take that, can you read that again?
Got it all but the last, no, I got all but the first, no, I didn't get in. All right. Anything else for Jenks? Okay, 175 North Street, notice of violation, so we got an update briefly.
Yeah. So he did get out, I mean, and Mike saw it, he did have somebody out there
So
to
Elsing, yeah.
put the survey stakes out and everything, and I went out there and chatted and, we talked about it and,
Were we right?
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
20, 30 feet.
Yeah, like in some places, there's.
The way your email made it sounded like it was a mistake.
Yeah.
That seemed like a pretty large mistake.
Oh, yes, no, it's definitely a large mistake.
Yeah.
That I was just
I don't think.
dictating what he said to me was. why. I
We're
was like,
emphasizing the word
that.
large or mistake. I thought James emphasizing the word mistake being.
So what's the outcome?
No, it seemed,
So I
I
think
think he was outside the line.
after
He didn't care.
talking to him about it, he was worried about like the line of sight stuff, and I let him know that if you want to change that, it would need to be through an amendment process, which involves coming back and, doing that whole
He
thing.
needs to do an amendment for what he's already done.
Well, I did let him know that if we just do an enforcement order and require all restoration, you don't have to touch the amendment. I mean, you don't have to do an amendment.
Yeah.
And it seemed like, I mean, he talked about already getting an engineer to start on restoration plans, because I let him know it would probably be better to start working on trying to get this solved rather than waiting, but.
Use in restoring a portion of the site before he starts building the rest of it.
What's he mean line of sight? It's a driveway.
Yeah, like going out, like
He wants to widen the opening.
he was talking about trying to get a amendment to move it further to the closer to the wetland because of the that roadway is terrible, but then I, let him know that it would need to be an amendment process, and we have the 25-foot no disturb zone, and like, that would not be just an easy, like, oh, yeah, like, that's fine, that makes sense. So, right, so,
What did he say about the setback violation all the way up the driveway?
yeah, oh, he knows that
So
was
that's the
wrong.
part he's working with an engineer on already.
The whole thing, cause I let him know that it would need to be, if he wanted to keep anything, it would be A, subject to your approval, and B, he would need to come ask for a specific amendment for anything, and then restore the rest, not just the driveway. So it would be an amendment for that small driveway portion, if you guys let him, and then restore the whole rest of where he went outside of the boundaries. And he was like, that seems
I'd
like
have-
a
I'd
lot,
have-
so
I'd have
I
to
would
see
just
it.
rather restore.
I'd have to see it on a plan to know whether or not we.
Yeah, and that's, he gave me like a little mock-up of something, and I was like, that's
road's
not
fairly straight.
clear.
It's a
So
street, yeah, as I
it has
recall, it
little
was
here.
very straight. He just made it extra wide,
Right.
twice as
I mean,
wide.
it's-
It's
there's
straight and
some
then-
It was straight, right? And then it just turns a little bit at the end.
There's a couple weird, like, I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, and if you guys wanna go do a site walk this weekend or whatever, like, I said you guys would probably wanna see it and see the difference yourselves, so.
So
I can
it's staked
coordinate a
out
site
to where it's
visit.
supposed to be.
Yes, yeah,
Oh, good.
yeah, so you can clearly see where it is off, which in some places it's significant and
Well,
some places it's not, so it's kind of a weird
So as you
mix.
face the
but-
driveway standing on North Street
Yeah.
there. And you're looking, he wants to widen it or move it over,
No,
shift
he,
it.
now that I
left.
explained that, well, he did, but now that I explained the process, he decided that sounded like too much work.
Yeah, it's not gonna be.
And frankly, given the width of that, it's already cut open and right at the street there. Compared to other driveways and so forth for houses, and this isn't like tractor trailers are supposed to be coming out of this industrial site, we need an extra 25 feet of line of sight to get the truck. I'd say absolutely not.
I think the entrance there was wired.
I
Yeah,
think it wasn't so much about the width, but was
Line of
more
sight, no, I'm
about
saying.
like that curve is kind of weird.
He's near a
But-
curve,
but-
yeah.
Right, but
that's North Street, it's
just
got
not
lots of curves
Yeah.
on it, and
big,
people on
yeah.
driveways that are a lot
See my
narrower,
driveway.
entrances, line of sight. I'm not saying you want to have people have bad.
DPW, they'll put in a blind driveway sign before his driveway. That's how most people handle that.
So.
I like the
it's
little guy with the
that
sunglasses, and
Yeah.
blind driveway,
um,
yeah. Okay. All right, that's.
So if you guys wanna take a look out there this weekend or next weekend or something, like, I can set something up, let me know, then, go from there. But
All right.
he's working on getting the engineered plan about
He,
where the restoration.
so he is planning on keeping the limits of disturbance that he has made, he's planning on keeping that.
No, he's planning on restoring to
Right.
the approved limits. Because I let him know anything outside of the approved limits, he'd need an amendment for
I
it.
suggest we walk it when that plan has been received. And we can walk it with something in hand, because it'll be staked.
Yeah.
You mean a restoration plan?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, since he's working on it, we don't have to issue an enforcement order, I think, at this point in time. We just, he is always continuing to.
Well,
do
did we
something.
issue a cease and desist on the rest of the project?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That's my only.
Which he wasn't in a hurry to do, as he said he was.
Yeah,
he
that
was
was
working on
part
it.
of, that was part of the
Down the
notice
road
they
in a
sent,
year.
was the cease and
I
desist
just wanted to
notice.
make sure that this process doesn't make him construction happy, try to get it all done.
Yeah. Nope,
This is his busy season, he said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, South Baltimore ending, and then a couple years down the road, we'll put 1,000 maybe.
Is he cooperative?
yeah. I mean,
He just doesn't
He's-
understand.
I don't I think he just went through the process and was like, okay. I'm
That's
good.
already on site,
Did
got
what
too
he's
much
doing.
reason.
I have a feeling he called Bill and Bill was like, you did what?
Right, most likely,
Yeah.
and that's kind of, I mean, when we were talking, like, at least it didn't seem like there was any ill intent, but
The guy who
it's
should
just
have
like,
told him to stay within the lines.
you screwed up there, we gotta fix it. You just-
Oh, he's
you're right,
got it.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
if I need to, I gotta do some plantings, like, I get it, like,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
And finally, tree policy.
the tree policy. Yep,
Well, before we get that, were you here for anything in particular? No, excellent.
Just listening.
Yeah,
Branch,
that's wonderful. That's what I did for a long
Yeah.
time.
I wasn't sure if you were here for Jenks Reservoir or if you were Danielle, so.
I'm here for the jokes.
Bobby, then you got some bad jokes
Sure.
coming at you, and I just.
What do you call a cow that's had a baby? Come on, you guys know this one, I told you. A decaffeinated cow?
We're still an open meeting, guys.
Okay. There you go.
Oh man, I was
Brian
gonna
Ray's
say,
online, that was all for you.
I was
All right,
gonna
so
say a
tree pol-
moother.
Tree policy, moving along. I gave her my 2 cents
Yep.
worth. A couple of items. The only other thing was.
There were, I mean, and I can, that's, if we wanna like, wait to like, say, yeah, that looks great until next meeting, like, we can do that, and I can send the whole thing to them. But they were like, yes, you can absolutely make policies related to that, so,
And they reviewed some of like the draft that you?
yeah.
But they being who for it?
I'll leave the group, yeah, just to make sure that we're.
I'll send out the final draft to them.
Is this the
But-
well?
Can you ask them the specific question about, because this is essentially administratively authorizing an alteration to the resource area,
Yeah.
which requires by regulation, by the act, a notice of intent. So can we, in fact, as a commission, administratively approve alteration without the filing of them? Is my question. Asking just like that.
Do you?
I'll type it,
Typing
yeah,
it?
I'll type
Thank you, that would be, I
So,
got you.
one of the things
This,
that,
this sets a precedent that I is on
I see what.
a gray
I
line
see-
that I don't think we want to sit on.
I see where you're going to.
so we do identify what a hazard tree is, because that was one of the things I highlighted, and. Trees dead, dying, and structural defects, goes with, I did, the section, town of Lincoln, or whatever it is.
The end, that portion
Yeah.
is just gonna be deleted anyway, and that wasn't even the.
One of the things that we haven't, addressed in any of the policy or the treatment thing, who's paying for this?
Well, that would just be, if it's on Concom land and it's a hazard, then town pays,
If it's
And if
within
it's-
25 feet in a resource area on somebody's property,
they pay,
they pay.
Yep, yeah.
But that's not stated anywhere.
right, but that's just.
Is it a town policy about that? Something, in
Yes,
other words, if it's some,
It's just like a legal thing, I cleared that up with after we had the discussion about a couple of those properties, yeah.
well, I'd like to be able to hang our hat on something where we can refer to a land court. Book, page number, or whatever, so that if we get somebody, property owner, who says, I'd like this tree taken down because it's a hazard, I know there's some wetlands here, where it turns out it's on their property, but they say. Okay, I'll sue you guys because it's in your jurisdiction area, I have to go to you guys and, or we say no because we think the tree's okay. And we're not gonna pay for it, you know, or it's. You know, something where the town will always wanna pay for it, I assume. That's.
It depends on the situation, though.
Well, I mean,
You got
There,
lost.
there were 2 trees on the back of the selectman's property, which I went over and looked at with the town DPW and.
Right.
Hannah. One was on, leaning over onto the property, but both were on the other side of the fence in what he said was town wetlands
Yeah.
conservation plan. The other one was a tree that the DPW guys that probably is dead, too early in the season to tell for sure, but if that's dead, it's a hazard for potentially falling on the house. It's not imminent. The selectman wasn't worried about that particular tree, he was more worried about the branch hanging over his garage, and that tree. But in both cases, I was thinking, well, this selectman's gonna pay for this, and then I realized, well, it's on Concom property, so technically, even though it's endangering his property, what's that?
50/50.
Well, yeah, but it's not spelled out
Yeah,
anywhere,
I
so,
clarified it with town, I can
okay.
have them write up a memo or something.
I would love to have
but
something, just so
Yeah,
we can,
that's
I
what
feel
they
like this is
clarified.
something that would be like I would assume what Hannah's saying. And I'm just thinking outside the box.
no, I'm,
Coming up with,
no, that, when we were standing there, that actually was a question. Well, who's gonna pay for this? And I said, well, and I'm thinking, this guy's a selectman, number one, number two, the DPW guys are here, and so forth, and I said, I'd have to check and see, I said, what's that? Doesn't, it just,
exactly.
as a resident. And that person was a resident, I was like, okay, well, that's a good question, because. And I was thinking in the past, most of the times the residents have paid for these things, but in most cases, it's been a tree within 25 feet. Of a resource area, but on their property, so it's a little clearer. Yes, we have jurisdiction, yes, you came to us for permission, yes, we agree it's a safety issue, yes, I take it down, done. We don't hear about it, we don't get a bill, we just make sure that they did it the proper way.
I
and
mean, in a land court issue. So say neighbor A has the bad tree, neighbor B asks neighbor A to take it down because it's hanging over their property. Neighbor A doesn't necessarily have to take it down, but now knowing that it's a danger tree, they then take the liability of if it does fall and damage their property, they have to pay for that. So like if it's on our property, we don't technically have to pay to cut it or cut it. We just accept the liability that if it falls and causes damage.
Right, and I think the town does not want to have that liability issue here on this property, not on that one, but here on that one, around town, sitting there
Right.
waiting to fall. Literally,
But we'd have to determine if it's actually a danger.
right, which is why I say the arborist, town arborist, they're like, what do you think? He said, well, those little trees, see, but this one does look like it's dead, but straight up, as opposed to the other one's leaning 20 feet from each other. And it's like, one of like a 60-foot tree, it's like, this is gonna be a big project. Get in there and take it up, but I was like, well,
Yeah.
I'm assuming town's a big one. And if the town ever says no, then it's on the town, because we brought it to their attention, but we don't even have a full policy to do that. I mean, I've never requested DPW to go in and take that tree out. I mean, this is the first time I've had a
Tell
DPW.
us whether it's on.
So having a policy is great, but I just like, anywhere we can get the town to say, or a little more things. say,
Spell out the specifics.
and the money is an issue for somebody. It's a couple grand to take these trees down, and we're telling them it's your responsibility. Cause on your property, oh, but you guys, I had to come to you for permission to take this tree down, now it's gonna cost me $5,000. I can't do that, well, be
There
serious.
is one specific question I had, because
Yes.
the one that we went to, that's been kind of hanging around for a very long time. Then there's also 176 North Street, so perhaps if, you know, you guys are across the street at 175 and you want to look at 176, there are two standing dead trees that are on property that I was contacted about like 2 weeks ago, that I was gonna have the tree warden go out there and check that out, and then I assume that we can be able to take that out, it's dead, but. And it seems like it's a hazard situation, and.
As into property or to a road, what's
To,
the?
to the person's property, right on the edge of their property, like on their, very close to their lawn.
So it would fall on a lawn, not the house.
Yes, but in the policy, I mean, lawn is kind of also considered part
Well,
of it.
because you might have a kid running across the lawn at the time.
That's like where people are, but so I guess I was, I don't know if that's a situation we could address through like an emergency permit, or if that's something where they need to submit an RD. That's where it gets a little tricky, because it's like, it's on our property. Do we need to submit an RDA to us because they would like it to be taken down because it's a hazard to them?
Yeah.
Tree policy would kind of help with that.
Yeah.
It would be DPW would take it out. 'cause
They
it's
submitted it,
town.
and we are the land.
Right.
So,
And
so there's,
they would have to come present, and it would be,
I don't think so.
who would need to pay for advertising and stuff?
Town.
The town.
Yeah, they're the.
I don't think that, I would view it as the property owner abutting Concom land says, there's a Concom tree that's endangering my property, you should come take it out, and we go out and take a look at it, because we would do that anyway, so just to see if it really is a liquid thing, or they're just exaggerating, and we make a determination. Tree warden, come on out, let's look at this, is this a hazard, is this tree gonna fall? Oh yeah, roots are gone, well, okay, fine, DPW, go take it out, because we don't wanna be liable. And we don't advertise, we don't go in, I know why, we don't do any of that for this stuff, we just say, tree warden, take it out, and, or, DPW, take it out, tree warden approved it.
That's why I made that answer for me, because I don't think we have that.
If we do, great, if we don't, then we gotta figure out how
If we do, that opens a whole other can of worms they're gonna get into.
Don't, you're barking up the wrong tree here, Dan. Okay, any other business, Pam, you have anything else before you fall asleep out there where we are?
No, almost asleep.
Okay, sorry, thanks for holding in there, so I will be, just a heads up, y'all, I'm going to attend my annual meeting starting Saturday morning, and we'll be back on the 23rd, if everything goes well, oh no, 24th, sorry. Probably up from Baltimore, I will be available by phone or email, I will not be totally incommunicado, so may take a day or two to get back
Big
there.
travels.
Yeah, thank you. But I got relatives all the way down, back, I'll visit too a little bit, so. It's fun.
We gotta close the meeting.
Yeah, we
But
gotta-
close meeting, I just want to let you know it's availability, so, there's no business. Ariana's made a motion, Pam second, all in favor, say aye, Pam?
I
Aye, okay, we have a unanimous vote, no, oh, wait.
I'm gonna say nay. I need more jokes.
Oh, no, no, no.
Why can horses not dance? Because they have two left feet. And, let's see.
Thanks, thanks.
Why was Cinderella so bad at sports?